Chapter 3572. Xian Zi bitterly smiled and landed on the flying carriage. He sat down cross-legged and asked in a low voice, "I wonder where Daoist Xiao is going? And where did you meet the king of the Qin state, Xian Yinming?" When Xiao Hua said that he came to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting and met Xian Yinming, Xian Zi sighed and said with emotion, "Alas, it's all because of fate. If I met you half a day earlier, I'm afraid I wouldn't have encountered such a disaster." "Oh, what do you mean?" Xiao Hua understood. "You're also going to the Jade Pavilion meeting? You just met Xian Yinming half a day ago?" "Of course." Xian Zi nodded. "Moreover, if I guess correctly, Xian Yinming and another Confucian cultivator were lying in ambush on the way to the Jade Pavilion meeting." "Damn it!" Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. He knew that the other two nascent soul cultivators must have the same goal as him. But then, Xiao Hua was puzzled again. He looked at Xian Zi and said in a low voice, "But the problem is, Xian Yinming is a Confucian cultivator. Why does he want the nascent soul of a Taoist cultivator? This is not something I can know." Xian Zi clenched his teeth and said, "Doesn't Xian Yinming have an accomplice? He must also be from the capital Qin state. When we find that person, we'll know." "Yes, there will be a chance in the future." Xiao Hua nodded and looked around, "But right now it's better for me to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting." "Oh, Daoist Xiao, this is..." Xian Zi looked at Xiao Hua in confusion. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. "I'm lost. I can't find where the Jade Pavilion is." "Ha!" Xian Zi laughed. This was the first time he saw a Taoist cultivator who was lost, not to mention a nascent soul cultivator. "Daoist Xiao, please land the flying carriage. Let I see where this is." Xian Zi was now a nascent soul cultivator, so he could only use his nascent soul to explore. After Xiao Hua landed the flying carriage, Xian Zi looked to the left and pointed, "Daoist Xiao, you went the wrong way. You should fly in that direction." "Thank you, fellow Taoist Xian." Xiao Hua also smiled and urged the Pegasus to fly towards the Jade Pavilion once again. After flying for a while, the atmosphere in the flying carriage became a little awkward. Xiao Hua looked at Xian Zi, who didn't close his eyes to meditate, but had a flicker in his eyes as he looked at him from time to time. He asked, "Taoist Xian, since things have come to this, it's useless to think too much about it. I'd better look forward. After all, it's better to have a nascent soul than to have a nascent soul obliterated." "Yes, I understand," Xian Zi hurriedly said, "but with my current situation, I really can't do anything about it." "That's right. What do you plan to do in the future?" Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel pity in his heart. He knew that this question of his definitely had a cause and effect, but in the end, he still spoke. When Xian Zi heard this, he hastily stood up and looked at Xiao Hua. He clenched his teeth and was about to kneel down. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had already waved his hand and stopped him from kneeling down. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xian, if there's anything you want to say, feel free to say it to me. If I can help, I'll help." Xian Zi's face was slightly red, and he said bitterly, "To be able to meet Taoist Master Xiao is I's fortune. Not only did Taoist Master save I, you also didn't have any thoughts of enslaving I. This is really the luck that I cultivated in my previous lives. Now that I've met Taoist Master Xiao, then in the future, I can't help but rely on Taoist Master. In my opinion, I don't have anything to make a deal with Taoist Master. I'm willing to swear a blood oath and serve Taoist Master for 1,000 years as the price for my survival. Of course, I also hope that fellow Taoists could do a few things for I in consideration of being a slave to I. Swear a hard oath? Serve for 1,000 years." Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and looked at the 1-foot-long nascent soul. If it was a nascent soul without a nascent soul, Xiao Hua wouldn't mind. But what's there to command about a nascent soul with a nascent soul? Moreover, if he really agreed, from Xian Zi's words, what would he have to do for him? Forget it. Xiao Hua didn't like trouble and hurriedly waved his hand. "Fellow Taoist is still a nascent soul cultivator. How can you lower yourself? Moreover, I don't like to order others around, so there's no need to mention this. But, Xian Zi was a bit tongue-tied. Oh, if you're afraid of being ordered around by others, then in order to survive, you can stay by this Xiao's side. It doesn't matter. Xiao Hua hurriedly said. When you feel that you can leave, just tell this Xiao. Taoist Master Xiao. Xian Zi was almost about to cry. He had cultivated for 1,000 years and had never seen such a righteous Taoist cultivator. Is this still a Taoist cultivator? This wasn't much. When Xiao Hua said the second sentence, Xian Zi really felt that happiness had come too quickly. Oh, if you have anything you want me to do, I can also say it. Of course, it can't be too difficult. Otherwise, I can't do it. Xiao Hua said with a smile, as if he was sure that he could help Xian Zi. Really? Xian Zi was shocked by happiness to the point that his brain couldn't function properly. After a while, he said, Taoist Master doesn't want any price. What price? Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, What fellow Taoist wants me to do is naturally how to cultivate my nascent soul. This kind of thing, it's naturally useful to I, right? I can also do it in advance, just in case. Yes. Xian Zi hurriedly nodded. Naturally, Taoist Master Xiao doesn't need to personally take revenge. What I want fellow Taoists to do is, of course, to protect my nascent soul cultivation and consider how to cultivate a scattered soul. Scattered soul? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes. He really hadn't heard of scattered soul. Fellow Taoist, have you heard of scattered immortals? Xian Zi wasn't surprised and said, Scattered soul is somewhat similar to scattered immortals. Never heard of it. Xiao Hua's answer really surprised Xian Zi. Cough, cough. Xian Zi coughed twice and said with a smile, Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation is profound and your future is immeasurable. Naturally, you don't need to know about such trivial things. I've only heard of scattered cultivators. Tell me, what are scattered immortals and scattered souls? Xiao Hua looked around and said, Right now, we're still far away from the Jade Pavilion gathering. Let's talk for now. Okay. Xian didn't have any power to refuse Xiao Hua and slowly said. Following Xian Zi's explanation, Xiao Hua gradually understood that the so-called scattered immortals were immortals in the immortal world who hadn't been granted an official position. At that time, the immortal world seemed to have some connection with the cultivation world. From time to time, there would be news from the immortal world. Moreover, there were many cases of people ascending to the immortal world. Loose immortals and righteous immortals had completely different influences in the cultivation world. Later, the connection between the immortal world and the cultivation world was cut off, and there was no more news from the immortal world. In the eyes of cultivators, there was no difference between righteous immortals and scattered immortals. Immortals had the future of ascending to the Mahayana realm. Afterwards, scattered immortals had new meaning. They were cultivators who had cultivated to the crossing tribulation stage, but hadn't passed the heavenly tribulation and lost their physical body in the heavenly tribulation. However, they were lucky enough to leave behind a nascent soul. If these cultivators had passed the heavenly tribulation, their physical body would disappear and they wouldn't be able to enter the heavenly realm. However, if they hadn't passed the heavenly tribulation, their nascent soul would be left behind. This kind of awkward situation was different from immortals, so they were called scattered immortals. A scattered immortal's nascent soul had a part of the heavenly tribulation's power, which formed the so-called immortal chi. However, it was also because there was no immortal chi in the cultivation world that it was difficult for scattered immortals to improve their cultivation. The most troublesome thing for scattered immortals was that the nascent soul had the power of the heavenly tribulation. Every once in a while, a heavenly tribulation would appear. The power of the heavenly tribulation would increase again and again until the immortal chi in the scattered immortal's body was completely purified. In fact, cultivators who had truly passed the heavenly tribulation could rely on their physical body to absorb immortal chi. When the immortal chi in their body was enough, they could ascend to the immortal world. However, scattered immortals didn't have physical bodies and could only use the heavenly tribulation to cultivate. They could gather the immortal chi in their body to reach the limit that the cultivation world couldn't accommodate. Of course, this process was extremely painful and dangerous. Each heavenly tribulation wasn't inferior to the initial heavenly tribulation. If a scattered immortal couldn't pass any of the heavenly tribulations, they would turn into ashes. Of course, this kind of hard work also had a huge harvest. After ordinary scattered immortals ascended to the immortal world, their strength would far surpass ordinary immortal world cultivators, and they would be valued in the immortal world. As for the scattered nascent soul that Xiansong Zi wanted to cultivate, it was also compared to the normal cultivation method and was even inferior to that of a scattered immortal. Scattered nascent soul was merely borrowing the cultivation method of a scattered immortal. After a cultivator lost their physical body, they relied on a unique cultivation method to cultivate using the nascent soul method and finally reached the heavenly tribulation stage. However, even if a scattered nascent soul cultivator transcended the heavenly tribulation, they could only be a scattered immortal. It was impossible to obtain enough immortal chi in one heavenly tribulation. In particular, scattered nascent souls didn't have physical bodies, and it was practically impossible for them to transcend the Desheng heavenly tribulation. The fate of a scattered immortal was miserable, but the fate of a scattered nascent soul was even more miserable. Alas, so that's how it is. After Xiao Hua finished listening, he sighed and said, I thought that loose immortals meant freedom, leisure, and comfort. Who would have known that this loose immortal is similar to loose cultivators who belong to sects and clans? This loose immortal is filled with blood and tears. However, fellow Taoist Xiansong Zi, actually with your current realm, you should consider. Xiao Hua actually wanted to say possession, but if Xiansong Zi possessed, then what about the person who was possessed? Xiansong Zi also didn't avoid Xiao Hua and said with a bitter smile, There's no need for Taoists to remind me. I naturally know that possession is the best path. However, the problem is that I's nascent soul has already been formed, and an ordinary body wouldn't be able to withstand it. How can a body that can accommodate I's nascent soul be something that I can possess in my current state? Currently, it's already not bad that I can survive. How could I dare to think about anything else? Besides, even if I want to possess, I still have to rely on Taoist Xiao. With Taoist Zhao's character. Yeah, that's right. Xiao Hua nodded. I definitely won't allow you to casually harm other people. Chapter 3573. Green-robed Xiao Hua came out as nascent soul and waved his hands, shouting, Not good, not good. It's like wearing a pair of small shoes, but also like wearing a very sullen Taoist robe. I can't move at all. If the shoes are small, you can make them bigger. If the Taoist robe is small, you can also modify it. Jade Archive Xiao Hua advised earnestly. We're poor, so just put up with it. Put up with what? Green-robed Xiao Hua rolled his eyes at Jade Archive Xiao Hua. He pointed at the two nascent soul cultivators and said, These useless things can't be nourished by the 5 chi righteous thunder. If they were to cultivate slowly, I'm afraid it would take thousands of years. Having is better than not having it. Jade Archive Xiao Hua naturally understood and said, Also, if you can adapt to this thing, won't you be able to come out and help when I'm in danger? Don't let it be like the 5 brocade cloud painting battle last time. Obviously, everyone can help, but there's no way to go out. Okay. Green-robed Xiao Hua waved his hand. Fellow Taoist, think of a way yourself. I know you've been thinking about that old bald donkey Guzhan's 200 years of cultivation. Fellow Taoist, don't forget that's the cultivation path of a Buddhist sex protector. There's no future. Jade Archive Xiao Hua gave a rare, embarrassed smile. I was just thinking about it. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to take it out and embarrass yourself, right? A gentleman is magnanimous. Green-robed Xiao Hua's voice drifted, and his figure disappeared again. Jade Archive Xiao Hua immediately tested it. Sure enough, when the 5 chi righteous thunder touched the nascent souls immediately showed signs of collapse. Helpless, Jade Archive Xiao Hua could only place the two nascent souls outside the 5 Qi righteous thunder and slowly nourish them with the true essence in his lower dantian. Xiao Hua took a look at the nascent soul that was flashing with 5 colored threads of Qi. He then opened his mouth and a flying sword rushed out. In the blink of an eye, the nascent soul's 5 colored threads of Qi were about to be cut in half. Xiao Hua then spat out another mouthful of Qi. The nascent soul's body flashed with a faint golden light. The surrounding Yuan Qi began to gather toward the nascent soul, slowly repairing the previously collapsed skin of the nascent soul. Kill. After the time it took to finish a meal, Xiansong Zi's weak nascent soul finally opened its eyes. Without any hesitation, the moment it saw the person in front of it, Xiansong Zi's nascent soul's eyes turned red. It rubbed its hands together, and the energy of heaven and earth surged. A powerful spell seal smashed towards the person's head. Xiao Hua had already anticipated this, so he wasn't angry. With a wave of his hand under the heaven and earth in the sleeve, even Xian Songzi, who was a nascent soul cultivator, felt as if his entire body had sunk into something solid. It was difficult for him to move, let alone mobilize the qi of heaven and earth. Fellow Taoist, this is a dog biting an immortal. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Do you think I am the Confucian cultivator who killed your physical body and captured your nascent soul? You're a Taoist cultivator? At this moment, Xiansong Zi was only a foot tall. He looked up and down at the giant like Xiao Hua. The hatred in his eyes was gone, but an indescribable fear was born. What caught Xiao Hua off guard was that Xiansong Zi's hands once again formed a spell seal with great difficulty. Golden light splashed out from Xiansong Zi's nascent soul. It was actually about to self-destruct. Damn it, you're sick. Xiao Hua was shocked. He angrily cursed and slapped his hand. The nascent soul's hand was displayed and firmly grasped Xiansong Zi's nascent soul. The nearby qi of heaven and earth was blocked. Xiao Hua's entire body even soared into the sky. He flew straight into the astral winds before stopping. He looked at Xiansong Zi in his hand with lingering fear. If something went wrong, he would immediately throw Xiansong Zi into the astral winds. Do you want to die? Xiao Hua coldly said. If you want to die, you only need to nod your head. This Xiao will immediately throw you out. Don't even talk about using some self-destruct technique. As long as you enter the astral winds, your little body that just became a nascent soul will immediately turn into ashes. Although Xiansong Zi was currently a nascent soul, he couldn't even sense a trace of qi of heaven and earth. Especially his own body, he couldn't move at all. He couldn't even answer Xiao Hua's question. Xiao Hua ignored him and continued to say, I know that your physical body was destroyed by the king of the capital Qin state. You have hatred in your heart, but your deep-rooted hatred should go to the king of the capital Qin state and take revenge on him. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The king of the capital Qin state has already been killed by this Xiao. If you want, you can go kill the other people of the capital Qin state. Of course, even if you kill a Confucian cultivator, this Xiao has no objections. What right do you have to self-destruct in front of your savior? Don't you know that if you self-destruct, this Xiao will also be implicated? If this Xiao knew, this Xiao would have just let that Xian Yin Ming obliterate your nascent soul. Seeing Xiao Hua ramble on for so long, the fear in Xiansong Zi's nascent soul's eyes slightly disappeared and revealed a pleading expression. Xiao Hua didn't dare to easily relax his vigilance. His nascent soul's hand slightly relaxed as he asked, If you want to die, then nod your head. This Xiao will lend you a hand. If you don't want to die, then shake your head. Xiansong Zi was somewhat silent as he stared at Xiao Hua. After half a cup of tea's time, he still didn't move. Forget it, forget it. How could Xiao Hua really send Xiansong Zi's nascent soul into the astral winds? Seeing that Xiansong Zi didn't speak, he waved his hand and said, Don't struggle. This Xiao was just joking with you because you really scared this Xiao. How about this? This Xiao will let you go. You can go wherever you want. Even if you want to self-destruct, you can. But wait until this Xiao leaves. Xian Songzi's nascent soul's eyes revealed a trace of disbelief, but soon after, he really believed it. Xiaohua flew for a moment. Seeing that there was no one nearby, he reached out with his nascent soul's hand and threw Xian Songzi's nascent soul to the side. Then he used the wind escape technique and ran far away. When he landed on the flying carriage, Xiaohua was still muttering. However, when he really urged the heavenly horse, his heart calmed down, and he suddenly realized why Xian Songzi was so scared. He then sighed and shook his head. Looking at the heavenly horse flapping its light feathers, his gaze was somewhat unfocused. Of course, it was only for a moment. Xiaohua raised his voice again and said, "Fellow Taoist, why are you following this Xiao for no reason? Whether you live or die has nothing to do with this Xiao. Can you just pretend that you never saw this Xiao?" The fellow Taoist Xiaohua spoke of was none other than Xian Songzi, who had used teleportation to land beside the flying carriage. In just a moment, Xian Songzi's nascent soul had already become somewhat dim. "I wonder if fellow Taoist can let I in for a chat." Xian Songzi was somewhat helpless. He seemed to be pleading, but also seemed to be negotiating. Xiaohua shook his head slightly and said, "I'm very sorry. Fellow Taoist is really too dangerous. This Xiao still wants to live for a few more years. If fellow Taoist wants to thank me, then there's no need to say anything. You and I are both Taoist cultivators. To be able to meet you is fate between us. Moreover, this Xiao didn't intend to save you. However, that Xian Yiming also wanted to kill this Xiao, so this Xiao killed him. When I saw that you were captured, I just happened to save you." Fellow Taoist, Xian Songzi sighed and said, "If I was captured by a Confucian cultivator or even killed, then all troubles would be over. However, if I was captured by a Taoist cultivator, then I wouldn't be able to reincarnate for 100 lifetimes. Fellow Taoist, don't say. You don't know about this and don't have such thoughts in your heart." TCH, Xiaohua flicked his sleeve and said, "Who do you think this Xiao is? This Xiao naturally knows that capturing a nascent soul can be of great use. It can be used as the tool spirit of a spiritual treasure or eaten to increase one's cultivation. However, does this Xiao need to use such methods? Moreover, if this Xiao wants to use it, why would I need you? That king of the capital Qin state killed more than one nascent soul cultivator. However, you were lucky and your primordial spirit wasn't erased. Fellow Taoist may be straightforward and upright, but there are very few people like you in the Taoist sect." Xian Songzi bitterly smiled. He knew that what Xiaohua said was correct. Otherwise, I would immediately be afraid when I saw that fellow Taoist was a Taoist cultivator. It's fine, it's fine." Xiaohua waved his hand again. "This Xiao didn't think about it before, but when I just returned, I already knew. This Xiao doesn't blame you anymore. You can go now." "Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao, for forgiving I." Xian Songzi's face revealed bitterness. He said again, "However, this world is so big. Where can I find a place to stand? If fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't help me, I'm afraid that in less than an hour, I will turn into ashes." Seeing that Xian Songzi's nascent soul had dimmed a bit as he spoke, Xiaohua sighed. He knew that Xian Songzi's nascent soul had just been born and couldn't withstand the impact of the energy of heaven and earth. It couldn't withstand the wind and rain of heaven and earth. If he really ignored Xian Songzi, 1,000 years of hard work would disappear in an instant. "Come in." Xiaohua was soft-hearted in the end. He waved his hand, and the restriction on the flying carriage dispersed. Xian Songzi revealed a happy expression and entered in a flash. After the restriction on the flying carriage was restored, Xiaohua still didn't feel at ease. He flicked his finger again, and several rays of light flashed around Xian Songzi's nascent soul. Xian Songzi immediately felt several warm currents surging around him. Xiaohua clapped his hand and took out several pieces of top-grade nascent stones. He asked, "Do you still want more nascent stones?" "Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao." Xian Songzi was overjoyed. He waved his hand and a black, earth-type top-grade nascent stone fell in front of him. As Xian hugged it with his two small hands, that nascent stone shrank visibly. When that nascent stone disappeared, Xiao Hua took out another Earth-type nascent stone and asked, "Fellow Taoist, do you still want more?" "Ah, thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao." Zi smiled bitterly. "I only have so many nascent stones. If I use any more, I'll be full. After all, a nascent soul is still a nascent soul. Without a body tempering nascent stones, these nascent stones can only be a kind of supplement." Xiao Hua nodded and put away the nascent stones. Zi looked at the flying carriage and Pegasus and bowed. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm Zi. May I know your Taoist name?" "Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Zi. I'm Xiao Hua. My Taoist name is Taoist Xiao." Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly returned the greeting. "So it's Taoist Xiao. I've been disrespectful," Zi said respectfully. "Previously, I was too impetuous. Now, I formally thank Taoist Xiao for saving my life." "Ah, no need to be polite." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "Actually, I didn't save your life." Chapter 3574. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Zi could only helplessly reply, "Therefore, this poor Taoist's current plan can only be to scatter my nascent soul, and when there's a chance in the future, I'll think about taking over the body. Since there is a path, there is an end. Fellow Taoist Zi, if you cultivate scattered nascent soul and scattered immortal, I will definitely support you no matter how difficult it is." Xiao Hua looked at Zi and said word by word, "But if you take over, I may not." Xiao Hua didn't say anything more. He believed that Zi would understand his meaning. Zi didn't know where Xiao Hua's confidence came from, but he was inexplicably moved. He cupped his hands and said, "I don't dare to have extravagant hopes for the future. I only want to get through the current difficulties first." "That's true. Take one step at a time. You don't have to worry too much about the future." Xiao Hua knew that Zi's mood wasn't good right now, so he didn't want to comfort him. He just casually said some words. Unexpectedly, Zi said seriously, "Taoist Master Xiao, you don't know, all of this is the will of the heavens." "Will of the heavens?" Xiao Hua was stunned. He was somewhat baffled. As early as 600 years ago, Zi's tone was somewhat aged, his gaze looking towards the clouds in front of the flying carriage, as if he was reminiscing. "I had just cultivated to gold core. In order to find a suitable cultivation method, I killed many Taoist cultivators. In the end, I finally obtained a cultivation method suitable for I from an unknown cultivator. And in this cultivator's small Chinquan pouch, I also obtained an incomplete ink cloud pupil. What was recorded inside was the cultivation method for scattered immortals. There is also a so-called scattered nascent soul cultivation method. It must be the cultivation experience of some scattered immortal senior." Speaking up to here, Zi was silent for a moment, then continued, "At that time, I felt that this secret technique was really inconceivable, and this thing was really boring, so I almost threw it away, but thinking that it was left behind by a scattered immortal senior, it could be considered precious, and I had never heard of scattered immortals before, I kept it. I didn't expect that the cause from 600 years ago would actually bear fruit today. No one do you know about scattered immortals?" Xiao Hua sighed again. "Taoist has actually obtained this ink cloud pupil. When fellow Taoist brought it up today, this Xiao still feels that I'm ignorant and inexperienced. Bodiless immortals are called immortals, but they actually live miserable lives. They live in fear every day, afraid that the heavenly tribulation will descend. That's why they do everything they can to find a way to avoid the tribulation and a way to deal with it. There are very few of them in the first place, so how can they appear in front of people?" Zi nodded. "Even if I knew about this, I've never seen a bodiless immortal before, and I've never heard anyone mention it." Xiao Hua pinched his chin and said, "That's right. According to what I know, as long as one can't pass the heavenly tribulation, no matter if it's the physical body or the nascent soul, both will turn into ashes. It's unlikely that the nascent soul will be tougher than the physical body and be able to escape the heavenly tribulation. There's always a way out. There's always an exception. Xian Song Zi smiled. 10,000 years later, I'll show you this exception. Good, this Xiao will wait and see. Xiao Hua said with a smile. I wonder how this Xiao can help you now? Tell me about it. That Mo Yuntong is an eyes Chinkuan bag. If you killed that bastard Xian Yinming, Mo Yuntong must be in your hands. Xian Song Zi smiled and said, Moreover, Ai's natal magic treasure, the Hanging Mountain Pagoda, should also be in your hands. Now that I can't stay outside for long, I can only rely on the Hanging Mountain Pagoda to survive. Oh, I understand. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out Xian Yiming's Chinkuan bag. He handed it to Xian Song Zi and said, It should all be inside. Take it yourself. Taoist. Xian Song Zi smiled bitterly. Now that I don't have the strength to truss a chicken, I have to rely on Taoist for everything. Even that nascent soul cultivation secret technique needs Taoist to pass on to me. Oh, this Xiao understands. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He knew that when Xian Song Zi lost his physical body, he couldn't cultivate any divine abilities. He really had to rely on Xiao Hua to pass on these secret techniques to him first. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate. He first looked for Xian Song Zi's magic treasure and gave it to Xian Song Zi. Xian Song Zi hugged the small pagoda with both hands, and his nascent soul flashed with light and faint magic power fluctuations. When the small pagoda also fluctuated, the small pagoda slowly shrank and fell into the nascent soul's hands. Only then did the vigilance on Xian Song Zi's face, which had never disappeared, slightly relax. Then, Xiao Hua looked for Xian Song Zi's shabby Mo Yuntong. Fortunately, although there were many things in Xian Yinming's Chinkuan pouch and Xian Song, they didn't care about the Mo Yuntong before. Xian Yinming had just obtained it from Xian Song Zi. Xian Yinming didn't have time to deal with it, so Xiao Hua only spent a little effort to find it. After obtaining Xian Song Zi's consent again, Xiao Hua placed the Mo Yuntong on his forehead and carefully looked at it. Then he stretched out his hand, and a faint crystal thread appeared on his index finger. He touched the forehead of Xian Song Zi's nascent soul. Xian Song Zi's nascent soul rapidly trembled, unable to withstand the power of Xiao Hua's touch. Xiao Hua was helpless. He could only pass on less than 30% of the Mo Yuntong's contents, which were suitable for Xian Song Zi's current situation. Even so, Xian Song Zi's expression became dispirited after reading this, and the luster of his nascent soul dimmed again. Fellow Taoist Xian Song. Xiao Hua frowned and said, Now you need to cultivate. This Xiao has also seen the contents of the Mo Yuntong. This Xiao will do his best to find suitable spiritual herbs and spiritual items for you, so that you can continue to cultivate. However, the spiritual items you need are really rare. To tell you the truth, this Xiao has never heard of them before. This Xiao doesn't dare to guarantee. Taoist Xiao, thank you for your trouble. Xian Song Zi was really out of breath. He said in a low voice, Those things are called ancient things. Perhaps they have changed their names after being passed down. Unfortunately, there are no diagrams. I will leave everything to Taoist Xiao. Now, I will enter the suspended mountain pagoda to cultivate. If Taoist Xiao has any news or any errands, you can take out the suspended mountain pagoda. Yes, fellow Taoist Xian Song can rest assured. This Xiao's luck has always been very good. Perhaps I will be able to find the items that fellow Taoist needs very soon. Xiao Hua said with a smile, Fellow Taoist can rest assured and cultivate in seclusion. Many thanks, many thanks. At this time, no amount of gratitude was enough. Xian Song Zi said a few words. His entire Yuanying flashed with an earthen yellow brilliance, causing the suspended mountain pagoda to also shine brightly. Soon after, the Yuanying slowly fell into the suspended mountain pagoda and disappeared. Xiao Hua looked at the suspended mountain pagoda in front of him that had lost its brilliance and fell onto the flying carriage. He secretly sighed. A Yuaning cultivator who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years had fallen into such a state in just one day. It really made one's heart cold. Xiaohua was worried about Xian Songzi's mood, so he didn't ask about Xian Songzi's origin. Because he was worried about the condition of Xian Songzi's Yuaning, Xiaohua didn't ask about the situation of the Jade Pavilion gathering. The suspended mountain pagoda couldn't be put into the space. Xiaohua carefully put it into his Chinquan bag. Then, without caring about the Pegasus, he clapped his hand and took the Enchanting in his hand. He placed it on his forehead and carefully examined it. In fact, as early as when Xian Songzi talked about the cultivation method of loose immortals, Xiaohua's heart was moved. This cultivation method was very similar to his current Yuaning cultivation method. Now, Xiaohua's Yuaning was growing vigorously under the bombardment of the 5 Qi righteous thunders. Wasn't it the same as a loose immortal increasing immortal spiritual force through the lightning tribulation? However, Xiaohua's 5 Qi righteous thunders didn't release immortal spiritual force. Moreover, the 5 Qi righteous thunders were also under Xiaohua's control, so they wouldn't be a threat to Yuaning. In fact, Xiaohua still didn't understand why the 5 Qi righteous thunders could promote the growth of Yuaning. Could it be because the 5 Qi righteous thunders were an item of the immortal palace and contained immortal spiritual force? But no matter how he thought about it, there was a problem. The immortal palace wasn't the immortal world, and the immortal palace of a Confucian cultivator wasn't the immortal palace of a Taoist sect. Of course, since Xian Songzi's Yuaning could cultivate a loose immortal soul, then the 2 Yuaning without primordial spirits that Xiaohua obtained could also cultivate a loose immortal soul under the support of the green-robed Xiaohua and the other primordial spirits. This temptation made Xiaohua's heart pound. However, after looking at it for a moment, several divine senses swept over the flying carriage, which attracted Xiaohua's attention again. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then threw Enchanting to Dragon Vein Xiaohua to take a look. He stood up, put his hands behind his back, and looked in the direction where the divine senses swept over. The direction where the divine senses swept over wasn't where the Jade Pavilion was, but where Xiaohua was about 100 miles away. After Xiaohua let the heavenly horse slow down its flying speed, in just the time it took to eat a meal, 3 cultivators wearing Taoist robes came over. The one in front was an old man with white hair and a beard. Below him was a pigeon-like bird, but this pigeon was about 2 zhang in size. The pigeon's face looked fierce, and when its wings flapped, it set off a powerful airflow. This old man had a red face, a pair of broom-like eyebrows, and leopard-shaped eyes. He looked majestic without being angry, which was quite a match for the bird below him. The 2 cultivators behind the old man were slightly younger, but their hair was also white, and their eyebrows were quite weathered. One of them was on a flying boat, and the other was on a flying sword. Although their faces were not very fierce, there was also a kind of powerful momentum in their eyes. It seemed that the 3 of them were not ordinary people. Fellow Taoists, although the 3 of them had already scanned Xiaohua with their divine senses, now that they really saw Xiaohua, they saw that Xiaohua was so young, and they couldn't see Xiaohua's strength even when using spells. They couldn't help but look at each other. The person in front hurriedly stood up from the back of the pigeon, cupped his hands, and said, "I'm Chanyu of Qingzhou, Qingyan Ridge. I wonder if you're going to the Jade Pavilion meeting?" Xiaohua naturally returned the salute and said with a smile, "I'm Xiaohua of Black Cloud Ridge in Yuzhou, and I'm going to the Jade Pavilion meeting." Could it be that the 3 of you are also going to the Jade Pavilion meeting? Haha, yes, that's right. Hearing this, Changyu raised his thick eyebrows and laughed. It's better to meet by chance than by invitation. We are really fated. That's, Xiaohua said with a smile. Now that we're close to the Jade Pavilion, if the cultivators we meet are not going to the Jade Pavilion meeting, that would be strange. Chapter 3575. Come. Changyu seemed to be very straightforward. He pointed to the 2 people behind him and said, "These are the 2 fellow Taoists I met on the way. The 4 of us are going to the Jade Pavilion together. It's really lively." I'm Zhu Qingli from Yangzhou Ruins Mountain. Greetings to fellow Taoist Xiao. The person on the flying boat also had a smile on his face. The person on the flying sword next to him, although he looked a little unwilling, reluctantly cupped his hands and said, I'm Wu Tianxin from Yangzhou's Panshan Cave. Hee, I'm very happy to see you two fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands, not because their cultivation was low. Ignore old Wu's dead face. Chang Yu looked at Wu Tianxin's appearance and didn't find it strange. He said to Xiao Hua, when you saw me before, he was also like that. Later, I heard from other fellow Taoists that he was originally like this. I don't know how many fellow Taoists he offended, but he didn't change. It's no wonder fellow Taoist Wu is like this. Zhu Qingli hastily explained he didn't intend to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering. However, I've encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation. It just so happens that a small country wants me to stand up for them, so I dragged fellow Taoist Wu to the Jade Pavilion. Xiao Hua smiled, touched his nose, and said, it seems. I've never said that I care, right? Everyone has their own nature. As long as they don't hinder others, it's fine. Previously, when I saw the three of you aggressively chasing after me, I thought you three fellow Taoists had bad intentions. Now that I see you three fellow Taoists being so friendly, I just calmed down. How could I care? Chang Yu smiled embarrassedly. He didn't seem to be embarrassed. Presumably, he didn't have any dirty thoughts before. He looked at the Pegasus in front of Xiao Hua and said, even if we have some plans, seeing that fellow Taoist Xiao dares to ride such a Pegasus, you should think about it in your heart, right? Besides, on the hidden immortal continent, our Tao sect has declined and is suppressed by Confucian cultivators. Even if we want to rule a country, we have to come to the Jade Pavilion to give face to Confucian cultivators. In this case, even if I can take fellow Taoist Pegasus, so what? Wouldn't it be better to directly kill a Confucian cultivator? Haha, fellow Taoist Chang is rather straightforward. Xiao Hua laughed. All you know is fighting and killing. Wu Tianxin said coldly. You kill me, I kill you. Sooner or later, both sides will suffer. The more I walk, the more scared I am. Fellow Taoists, listen to me. This Jade Pavilion gathering is definitely not a place to be taken lightly. While we haven't entered yet, we'd better get out of here as soon as possible. Old Wu, Chang Yu was not surprised. It seemed that he had heard these words several times. He turned back and said, you're already in the middle stage of the Gold Core Realm. If you want to enter the late stage of the Gold Core Realm, have you prepared all the spiritual herbs and medicinal pills you need? I've already reached the bottleneck of the late Gold Core stage, but I've only prepared less than 30% of the things needed to conceive a nascent soul. If this goes on, I won't be able to conceive a baby within my lifespan. Instead of waiting for death like this, why don't I go to the Yaotai Palace and fight? Fellow Taoist Wu, Senior Chang is right. Aren't you in an awkward situation now? Those spiritual herbs are useless for the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, but they have the spiritual herbs in their hands. Even if they ask great alchemists to refine them into ordinary medicines, they won't give them to us. If we don't have the support of country and recruit disciples as the state preceptor, how can our cultivation progress further? If we take 10,000 steps back and die, won't we have no disciples at all? How can the inheritance of our Taoism continue? Zhu Qingli and the other two obviously argued a lot on the way, and today they argued again. It's easy for you and me to leave today, but maybe we'll have to come here again 10 years later. 10 years. These 10 years are nothing in our eyes. Maybe fellow Taoist Wu doesn't care, but in Senior Chang's eyes, these 10 years are a matter of life and death. How can you have 10 more years? If Senior Chang is like this, who knows when we'll be like this? Therefore, we should cherish every day and night on the road of cultivation. Do you think I don't know? Wu Tianxin rolled his eyes and said, I don't want to come to the Jade Pavilion because I want to save time for cultivation, right? Without elixirs and primordial stones, what can you do even if you have time? Chang Yu said with a smile. Facing Chang Yu, Wu Tianxin didn't dare to be as merciless as he was to Zhu Qingli. He could only smile bitterly and said, I don't think we can get anything more when we arrive at the Jade Pavilion. There's obviously a dark shadow in this Jade Pavilion gathering. What right do Taoist cultivators have to tell us what to do? Not to mention that a single state preceptor's lot can lead several Taoist cultivators to fight each other. Even if Taoist cultivators want the approval of Confucian cultivators to become state preceptors, we can see that Confucian cultivators are harboring evil intentions. Fellow Taoist Wu, you think too much. Zhu Chengli obviously didn't agree with Wu Tianxin's thoughts. He shook his head and said, "The Jade Pavilion gathering has existed for many years in the hidden immortal continent, and many Taoist cultivators have become state preceptors. If there's a dark shadow, why don't others say it? Look at Senior Chong. Isn't he only willing to come to the Jade Pavilion gathering because the monarch of a country begged Senior Chong to become his disciple? In my opinion, there's nothing in this world that isn't a secret. Even if there are some secrets in the Jade Pavilion gathering, it's normal. Actually, if fellow Taoist Wu doesn't want to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering, you can find a Taoist country and cultivate under the state preceptor. It's also possible." Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he interrupted. Wu Qianxin curled his lips and said self-deprecatingly, "With my temper, how can I please others? Since I can't be their direct disciple, it's better for me to cultivate on my own." Forget it. Let's not talk about it anymore," Chang Yu said with a smile. "The four of us met for a reason. I don't know who will get the state preceptor's lot, but I can guarantee that as long as I can take charge of country, I can ask the three of you to come out and help." "Hee, thank you so much, Senior Chong." Zhu Chengli was very happy. He cupped his hands and thanked him. As for Xiao Hua and Wu Tianxin, they both smiled and didn't say much. "Let's go," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "I still have the same words. Everyone has their own thoughts, and everyone has their own fate. No one can force anyone. Since we've come to the edge of the Jade Pavilion, we'd better go and take a look first. No matter what, this is a real grand meeting of our Taoist sect." Yes, even if fellow Taoist Wu doesn't want to go in, it's possible to find things for cultivation. Zhu Chengli nodded again and again. Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, "Fellow Taoists, do you mean that there are still auctions in the Jade Pavilion gathering? Why haven't I heard of it?" "It's not to the extent of auctions," Chang Yu said with a smile. "I've heard that there are some ordinary exchanges which have gradually started in the past 200 years. After all, our Taoist sect cultivators are in the minority. In ordinary auctions in the hidden immortal continent, our Taoist sect cultivators use very few things. Now that we have a rare opportunity to gather together, each of us must have something that others want, but we don't need." Not bad. Xiao Hua smiled. Wasn't this the small trade gathering in the morning rain continent? It was exactly the opportunity he liked. The Jade Pavilion was a mountain and an extremely high mountain peak. However, the mountain range around the Jade Pavilion mountain was extremely vast. At a glance, it was thousands of miles and tens of thousands of miles. It was several times larger than the territory of an ordinary country in the hidden immortal continent. However, as the ancients said, the mountain was famous not because of its height, but because of its immortal. The water was famous not because of its depth, but because of its dragon. Although the Jade Pavilion mountain was only a mountain peak, this mountain peak represented a mountain range that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. In front of the Jade Pavilion mountain, the entire mountain range had no other name. However, even though the Jade Pavilion gathering was called the Jade Pavilion, it was also a grand meeting where Taoist sect cultivators gathered. However, the place where the imperial tutor's lot was truly obtained was not the Jade Pavilion mountain. After the Jade Pavilion mountain, within the endless mountain range, there seemed to be no place where the imperial tutor's selection was not held. The entire mountain range was a place where Star-Lord Hall could freely display their abilities. 10 years ago, the selection competition might be held in a river. This year, it could be held in an ancient tree on the mountain peak. 10 years later, it could also be held in an inconspicuous cave. As for where it would be held 20 years later, it would depend on Star-Lord Hall's interest. Not only was the location of the selection different, even the selection method was not the same. Sometimes a Taoist sect cultivator would sign up within a set time. Then, Star-Lord Hall would randomly group these cultivators together. In the end, some cultivators who won would obtain the Imperial Tutor's lot. Sometimes, all the Taoist sect cultivators would be divided into several groups. Every group would produce the Imperial Tutor's lot. There were even times when Star-Lord Hall did not choose the first few winners. Instead, they would first determine the rankings of the cultivators and then randomly draw a number. Whichever number was drawn, the corresponding cultivator would obtain the Imperial Tutor's lot. In particular, the number of the Imperial Tutor's lot in each Yaotime meeting was not always certain. Sometimes it was dozens, sometimes it was hundreds, and so on. Of course, among the many variables in the Yaotime meeting, there was one that was eternal. That was, no matter how the cultivators who entered the Yaotime meeting died, no one would care. In short, the Yaotime meeting was the rhythm of Star-Lord Hall, using all the methods in the entire mountain range, and using the Imperial Tutor's lot as bait to kill the Taoist sect cultivators who participated in the Yaotime meeting. But even so, whether it was those who could see the essence, or those who could not see the essence, or those who had a plan in their heart, or those who had a fluke in their heart, the Tao sect cultivators of the 9 regions of the hidden immortal continent still appeared in the vicinity of Yaotime Mountain like carps crossing the river. How could Xiaohua not be one of them? Xiaohua, Changyu, and the others flew like this for a few days. After exchanging what they knew, they finally understood why Immortal Li Xiang did not tell them the specific situation of the Yaotime meeting. Because everything could not be used as reference, and all the experiences could be the cause of death. Only in the Yaotime meeting, it was really wise to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. Chapter 3576. As for Changyu and the other two, they were even more shocked. Although the past few days had not been long, and they were still unable to see through Xiao Hua's cultivation, Wu Qianxin had inadvertently asked a few difficult questions about cultivation. He had originally wanted to ask Changyu for advice, but before Changyu could finish, Xiao Hua had mercilessly refuted him. Changyu was naturally unconvinced and brought out a few of his doubts to discuss. In the end, Xiao Hua did not have too many reservations and answered them in detail. So much so that other than Xiao Hua asking about the situation of the Jade Pavilion gathering and the situation of Qingzhou and Yangzhou, the 3 of them took turns to ask Xiao Hua for advice most of the time. In the distance, a bluestone mountain stood between heaven and earth like a jade tablet. The edge of the bluestone mountain was an undulating mountain range. The 3 of them were already incomparably respectful to Xiao Hua. Seeing Xiao Hua put away the Pegasus and flying chariot, the 3 of them hurriedly jumped down from the flying beast and flying boat. They put away their flying tools and stood respectfully beside Xiao Hua. Looking at the Yaotime Mountain, Xiao Hua could not help but be somewhat stunned. Previously, he had not released his divine perception to explore the Yaotime Mountain, so he did not know what they were feeling this time. However, what surprised him was not the Yaotime Mountain, but the area under the Yaotime Mountain. There were tents everywhere, and around these tents, there were many soldiers and generals in bright armor. The armors of these generals were different, and the military flags around the tents were also different. It was obvious that they were not of the same standard. Seeing Xiao Hua's somewhat surprised expression, Changyu hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, the vicinity of the Yaotime Mountain has been blocked by Confucian cultivators using a defensive formation. You cannot use your divine perception to explore. There are even some places that have counterattacks. Fellow Taoist, please do not forcibly break the formation." Changyu's tone was very respectful. Although he did not call Xiao Hua senior, it was no different from facing a senior. "No." Xiao Hua smiled and pointed at the tents. This Xiao is wondering why there are so many soldiers. "Oh, fellow Taoist Xiao," Zhu Qingli also said, "these are not the soldiers of Star-Lord Palace, nor are they arranged by any Confucian cultivator. These are all sent by various countries. Even many monarchs will come personally. Their goal is to recruit our Taoist cultivators." Some didn't have a big appetite. Whether it was those who participated in the Yaotime meeting or Taoist cultivators who came to watch the fun, as long as they met their requirements, they could get their offerings. Some came for the cultivators who got the Imperial Preceptor's lot. Of course, these countries should be established by Taoist cultivators. On the other hand, the former might have been founded by Confucian cultivators. These monarchs are just recruiting our Taoism cultivators to be their hired thugs. If they are sincere, why would they appear here? Wu Tianxin still spoke in an unsociable manner. No matter what, their presence here represents their attitude. Chang Yu said unhappily. Moreover, their arrival can at least allow some Dao sect cultivators with shallow cultivation to have a place to stay. Old Wu, don't always look at things from the bad side. Xiao Hua smiled and said, this Yaodai gathering is getting more and more interesting. Indeed, I've heard people talking about it before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Now it seems that I've come a little late. Chang Yu nodded. If I had come in the past, I might have encountered some opportunities. Maybe we won't be able to go back. Xiao Hua faintly reminded. Oh, this can't be right? Chang Yu was stunned. I've never heard of Taoism cultivators who don't participate in the Yaodai gathering disappearing for no reason. If Taoism cultivators who disappear can send messages, can they be called disappearing? Wu Qianxin replied with a somewhat sarcastic tone. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're thinking too much. Chang Yu said embarrassedly. Even if the Confucian cultivators have such a plan, I'm afraid they won't really do it. Otherwise, who would come to the Yaotai gathering? Xiao Hua shrugged his shoulders, pointed to the sky, pointed to the ground, and pointed to the mountain peak. He said with a smile, Heaven knows, earth knows, Yaotai Mountain knows, but we Taoism cultivators don't know. Chang Yu wanted to say something again, but he saw a flying boat breaking through the sky from afar. A middle-aged Taoism cultivator was standing on it. So Chang Yu closed his mouth and stood in the air, waiting. In just a moment, the flying boat approached. Everyone could clearly see that the person on the flying boat was actually a cultivator of the second stage of Yuanli. When the cultivator saw the four people, he immediately bowed and said, Junior greets the four seniors. When Xiao Hua and the others saw that this cultivator didn't report his name and flew from the direction of Yaotai Mountain, they already understood something. Chang Yu raised his hand and said with a smile, No need to be so polite. Are you the reception envoy for the Yaotai gathering? Senior, there is no reception envoy for the Yaodai gathering this time. Junior is only here to give you the tokens to enter the Yaotai Mountain. As for the matter of entering the Yaotai Mountain in 10 days, Senior, please do as you please. As the cultivator spoke, he took out 4 bamboo slips from his bosom and respectfully presented them in front of the 4 people. Xiao Hua and the others took them and scanned them with their divine senses. They couldn't see anything special about these bamboo slips. Chang Yu hurriedly stopped the cultivator, who turned around and asked, I want to ask you, since there is no reception envoy, how can we enter the Yaotai Mountain? Or can we wait for these 10 days? As far as I know, at the foot of the Yaotai Mountain, there have always been quiet rooms and caves for the cultivators who come to participate in the Yaodai gathering to rest. Who would have thought that the cultivator himself was completely clueless? He smiled bitterly and said, Senior, this junior really doesn't know. This junior is in charge of everything within sight. Whenever a senior comes, this junior will hand over the token and not ask about anything else. If senior knows where there is a quiet room, senior can go. Forget it, you can go. Chang Yu naturally wouldn't make things difficult for a junior with second-level essence force. He smiled and waved his hand to indicate that cultivator to go. Only then did he turn around and say to Xiao Hua, Fellow Taoist Xiao, this time's Yaodai gathering is really loose. Previously, early gold core stage cultivators weren't allowed to enter the Yaotai Mountain, and this disciple is only at the heartbeat stage. The seniors he mentioned even include spirit tranquil stage disciples. Could it be that this time's Yaotai gathering has more lots for the state preceptor than before? If there are more, won't fellow Taoist Chang be happy? Xiao Hua said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Chang will also have the opportunity to get the state preceptor's lot and become the state preceptor. Not at all, not at all. Chang Yu said with a smile, I only came to try my luck. Fellow Taoist Xiao is the one who is truly confident. Xiaohua smiled and looked around. He said, "Since there's no restriction on where we can rest, we can just find a place to rest." Fellow Taoist, Xiao doesn't know. Chang Yu explained, during the Yaotai gathering, although Star-Lord Hall didn't send any disciples to maintain order, there won't be any Confucian cultivators near the Yaotai Mountain. After all, this is Star-Lord Hall's face. If we're too far away from the Yaotai Mountain, it might not be safe. Therefore, I think it's better to go to the bottom of the Yaotai Mountain first. Moreover, it's rare for us Tao disciples to gather together. If we're close, won't we be able to move around more? I don't care. I'll listen to fellow Taoist Chang. Xiaohua had always been casual about this kind of matter and nodded in agreement. Xiaohua naturally knew about the dangers near the Yaotai Mountain. Even someone as strong as Xiansong Zi had lost his physical body. Chang Yu and the others were simply no match for them. Wu Tianxin and Zhu Chunli naturally didn't have any objections. The three of them followed Chang Yu and slowly descended to the foot of the Yaotai Mountain. Before the four of them arrived, Tao cultivators flew out from the numerous tents surrounding the Yaotai Mountain. However, these cultivators seemed to have a tacit understanding. The ones who flew out first directly flew in front of Xiaohua and the others. Moreover, the ones who were a few steps slower waited in midair. "Seniors, please." The one who rushed out first was a short cultivator at the second grade of origin power. When this cultivator arrived in front of Chang Yu, he immediately bowed and said, "I was sent by the state preceptor of Yongzhou's Fian Kingdom. I'm here to respectfully wait for Senior. I wonder if Senior is interested in accepting the offerings of my Fian Kingdom?" The offerings of my Fian Kingdom. As he spoke, that cultivator very familiarly read out a long list of conditions. Then, he looked at Xiaohua and the others with a smile. Chang Yu smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "Thank your state preceptor on behalf of I. We're here to participate in the Yaotai gathering. Everything can wait until after the Yaotai gathering." "All right, Junior understands. This is my Fian Kingdom's token. If Senior is interested, you can use this token to come to my Fian Kingdom." That cultivator didn't say anything else. He respectfully took out 4 swallow-like tokens from his bosom and handed them to Xiaohua and the others. Xiaohua smiled and extended his hand to receive them. Chang Yu and the others could only accept them. Then, that cultivator cupped his hands again and flew down. It didn't matter that Xiaohua accepted the Fian Kingdom's tokens. Then, that cultivator who was waiting in midair stepped forward. This cultivator seemed to have heard Chang Yu's words. Without wasting any time, he took out a ring-shaped token and handed it to Xiaohua and the others. He respectfully said, "The offerings of my Fian Kingdom are all written in the token. Seniors, you'll know a glance. Junior respectfully awaits Senior's arrival." After saying that, he flew down without any hesitation. Next, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dozens of cultivators handed over their tokens one after another. Xiaohua somewhat refused, but when he saw that those cultivators were also eager, he didn't have the nerve to put down his face and could only accept them. Fortunately, a few other Taoist cultivators flew over from other places. The remaining cultivators wanted to be in the front, so they hurriedly handed over their tokens to the 4 people and hurriedly flew to the others. Looking at the strange token in his hand and thinking about the large pile of tokens in the small Chinquan bag, Xiaohua's expression was extremely wonderful. This Yaotai gathering hadn't started yet. He hadn't even set foot on Yaotai Mountain yet, but his harvest was already so full. This really made Xiaohua feel embarrassed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Chang Yu couldn't help but laugh. He didn't blame him and said, "You're too soft-hearted. These countries, you definitely won't go. These tokens are trash. If you refuse at the beginning, the rest of the people may not necessarily follow. Look at those people, they're simply disdainful of these people." Chapter 35:77. As Chang Yu spoke, he pointed at the cultivators who arrived later than them. Sure enough, as Chang Yu said, those cultivators waved their hands and flew away without waiting for the low-level cultivators of the various countries to speak. Some of them even waved their hands, and a gust of wind blew those low-level cultivators away. Xiao Hua helplessly touched his forehead and said with a smile, "I'm not soft-hearted, but seeing that we're all Dao sect disciples, I have to be a little lenient." "Huh?" Wu Tianxin let out a rare laugh and looked at Xiao Hua with interest. Isn't fellow Taoist Xiao being soft-hearted? Although these so-called Dao sect cultivators were the clothing of Dao sect cultivators, their hearts are already Confucian cultivators. They are even Dao sect lackeys cultivated by the various Confucian countries. Perhaps, Xiao Hua smiled. In fact, not to mention Dao sect cultivators, even if a few Confucian scholars came over with tokens with smiles on their faces, with Xiao Hua's temperament, he might not necessarily refuse. It was just a matter of taking a few more tokens and listening to a few more nonsense words in the air. It was just a small effort. While they were talking, the few Dao sect cultivators behind them passed through the many tents and barracks and flew into Yaotai Mountain. Those low-level cultivators who were recruiting talents didn't seem to be dejected and flew back to their respective barracks as if they had completed their mission. At the side of a small tent, a man in armor looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. There was some hesitation and confusion between his brows, as if he knew Xiao Hua. He seemed to want to go over, but at the same time, he seemed to be thinking about something. Zhu Chunli thought differently from the others. With a smile, he said, "When we were waiting for Gold Core cultivators, those monarchs only sent low-level Dao lead disciples to talk to us. If there are nascent soul cultivators here, I suppose the monarchs of various nations will come personally." Chan Yu waved his hand and motioned for Xiao Hua and the others to fly down with him. At the same time, he said, "If fellow Taoists are nascent soul seniors, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. For nascent soul seniors to come here, they must have a plan, and it's unlikely that they will be persuaded by these country lords. Moreover, if these country lords really want to invite nascent soul seniors to be state preceptors, they will have to wait until after the Yaodai conference." After flying past the continuous stretch of tents, they were already close to Yaotai Mountain. However, the scenery of Yaotai Mountain changed once again. The bluestone mountain from before began to become clear. The various sceneries on the mountain were rather eye-catching. There were relaxed green cypresses, waterfalls and small ponds, mountain paths, and even some immortal birds and ferocious beasts spreading their wings and leaping in the forest. However, after flying for a while, the scene gradually blurred. Layers of clouds began to appear in the sky. In the end, the entire Yaotai Mountain was covered by a layer of red clouds. Even a mountain range behind the Yaotai Mountain was connected to the entire sky, tightly covered by the red clouds. Not to mention that the clouds looked like ripples on water to the naked eye. Even divine sense was reflected by the layer of clouds. It was impossible to see the true appearance of the Yaotai Mountain. Confucian cultivators are so generous. He actually set up a defensive formation over the entire Yaotai Mountain range. Xiao Hua was somewhat aghast. However, after thinking about it, he understood. This Yaodai conference had been held for who knows how many years. Even if they set up a formation over several kilometers, it should have been completely covered over these years. Under the heavy pressure of the clouds, only a large area at the foot of the Yaotai Mountain could be seen. On this foothill, there were some palaces and some caves. Some of the palaces flickered with splendor, while some of the palaces were completely dark. The caves were the same. Occasionally, cultivators would fly out of the caves. These cultivators would either go to the palaces at the side or fly to a large plain at the foot of the mountain. On this plain, there were numerous pavilions that were less than a dozen feet in size. These pavilions had the same style. They were all square and appeared ordinary. However, they were all built with bluestone. They had doors and windows. Similarly, some of these pavilions were suffused with a bluestone splendor. Lines of talisman characters flickered within the splendor, while others were completely dull. Between the pavilions, there were some commonly seen spiritual trees. Some of them were blooming flowers, some bore fruits, and a strong fragrance assailed the nostrils. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Chang Yu saw that Xiao Hua only raised his head to look at the clouds and didn't care about those pavilions and palaces. He reminded in a low voice, "We want to find a suitable, quiet room to rest. Do you think we should live together? Or do we cultivate separately?" "Oh, the palaces at the foot of the mountain are reserved for nascent soul stage seniors. The similar pavilions and the quiet rooms in the caves are reserved for other cultivators. As long as there is no light, there will be no one. We can choose whatever we want." "Oh," Xiao Hua nodded. He withdrew his gaze from the clouds and looked at the seemingly endless pavilions. He said, "What does fellow Taoist Chang think? I think that since we came together, we should help each other 10 days later. Why don't we live together? If something happens, we can take care of each other." Chang Yu looked at the fervent gaze of Zhu Chengli and the absent-minded Wu Tianxin and said, "Okay, we'll do as fellow Taoist Chang says." Xiao Hua didn't need to cultivate in any special way, so he nodded in agreement. However, before Chang Yu could say anything, he heard the sound of a tsunami behind him. It was as if a huge wave was coming from afar. "Ah!" Chang Yu was shocked. He hurriedly turned his head and saw that in the distant sky, there was indeed a layer of blue waves. Chang Yu couldn't help but be shocked. "What's going on?" "Nothing special. Take a closer look." Xiao Hua frowned and calmly replied. Xiao Hua had already released his divine sense. At this time, there were also many strong and weak divine senses sweeping out from all over the Yaotai Mountain. The blue waves were like waves. In just a few breaths, they had already rushed into everyone's field of vision. On the blue waves, a huge ship came with a light. There were more than 10 huge sea turtles around the ship. On the turtles, there were more or less children dressed in Taoist robes. These children were holding flags that emitted a blue light. When the flags were waved, the shells of the sea turtles surged with the color of water. These colors of water connected to each other to form a majestic blue wave. The ship itself also emitted a blue light. This blue light combined with the blue waves of the sea turtles. It was as if the ship was drifting on the sea. Not only that, there were no less than 9 pythons in front of the ship. Each of the pythons was more than 10 feet long. They each spat out a blue light and pulled the ship in the direction of Xiao Hua and the others. "Damn it, which senior is this?" Zhu Chengli saw the imposing manner of the ship and couldn't help but cry out. Does a person with this kind of honor still need to participate in the Yaotai conference? As the ship got closer, a beam of light appeared. Another cultivator on the flying ship seemed to want to deliver the token of the Yaotai conference. However, the water on the ship splashed out and the cultivator was sent flying. He couldn't get close to the ship at all. "Hey, who are you? How dare you offend Taoist Yuan Qing's backing?" A child flew out from the sea turtle closest to the cultivator and shouted harshly. The poor cultivator finally managed to stand firm on the flying ship. He cried out in fear, "I'm here to deliver the token of the Yaotai conference to Taoist Yuan Qing. Give it to me." The child stretched out his hand and said, "But..." The cultivator looked at the people on the turtle, as well as the people on the boat, that he couldn't see clearly. It seemed like he wanted to ask how many people were on the boat, but after muttering a few words, he didn't say anything. He reached out and took out a token. Before he could give it to the boy impatiently reached out and the token flew into the boy's hand. The boy didn't say anything and chased after the turtle. "Tsk, tisk." Zhu Chengli smacked his lips and said, "A nascent soul senior is really powerful. Hee, let's see what those who want to recruit Taoist cultivators will do." Wu Tianxin looked with interest at the tents behind him that seemed to outnumber the pavilions and said with a smile. Unfortunately, Wu Tianxin was disappointed. The low-level Taoist cultivators from various countries who were flying like butterflies were now hiding in their tents. He didn't see any one of them. "Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, why are you moving after sitting still for so long?" At this moment, a silver rainbow light streaked across the sky. A young cultivator with a ruddy face stood high in the sky with a horsetail whisk in his hand. Hong Songzi, why are you here?" A very high-pitched voice came from a ship. Then, a similar green water rushed out from the ship. A cultivator with long white eyebrows and a green Taoist robe appeared on the water. Hong Songzi. This senior is Hong Songzi? Chan Yu heard from the side and was pleasantly surprised. It seemed that he had admired Hong Songzi for a long time, similar to Chan Yu. Zhu Qingli's face also showed a kind of ecstasy. He pulled on Wu Tianxin's Taoist robe and couldn't suppress his excitement. He said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Wu, this senior is Taoist Yuanqing? It's unbelievable that I can see him here." Wu Tianxin was a bit aloof and didn't seem to care. However, his gaze was also looking at the two nascent soul cultivators in the sky. "Are these two fellow Taoists very famous?" Xiao Hua asked with interest. "Of course," Chan Yu said proudly. "This Hong Songzi is a cultivator from our Qing province's Cloud Dream Cave. He already had the strength of a nascent soul more than 1,000 years ago. Now, I'm afraid he has already reached the middle of the 4th grade of Essence Force. He is one of the famous Taoist cultivators in our Qing province." "One of them?" Xiao Hua smiled and asked. "Then there must be others. Forgive me for being ignorant, but I wonder who these fellow Taoists are." "Of course, Fire Mountain Range's Fairy Huofeng, Golden Jade Valley's young master Shua Jin, Lingyu Country's Taoist Qi Ping, Jiaxian Country's Cloud Dream Fairy, and so on. They're all nascent soul cultivators who are as famous as Senior Hong Songzi." Chan Yu said with great familiarity. "Fire Mountain Range? Golden Jade Valley?" Xiao Hua frowned. "These nascent soul fellow Taoists don't need to be state teachers." Chapter 3578. He, fellow Taoist Xiao, is too old-fashioned. Zhu Qingli was very excited and whispered, "We don't have the resources to cultivate, so we can only look for them. However, although I haven't seen Volcano Ridge and Golden Jade Valley, it sounds like they are similar to Taoist Yuanqing's. They have resources such as small primordial stone veins near their caves. With these veins, these seniors can continue to cultivate without ruling a country. It's a pity that these spirit veins are so rare. We don't have the fortune." Wu Tianxin snorted. "Even if we find these spirit veins, it'll only benefit others." Hearing this, Xiao Hua's interest was piqued. He smiled and said, "These nascent soul Taoists, are they starting their own sects? Do Confucian cultivators allow them to be carefree?" "Who said Taoist Yuanqing started his own sect? He never accepts disciples. It's just that some Taoist countries send Taoist soldiers to him for guidance when they have the heart to do so." Zhu Qingli hurriedly said. "Then, fellow Taoists, are there any famous nascent soul cultivators in Yangzhou?" Xiao Hua knew that there were always exceptions, so he didn't ask and changed the topic. Zhu Qingli smiled and said, "Other than Taoist Yuanqing of Lufeng Ridge, there's Elder Song of Jade Forest Ocean, Yi Country's Senior Yi Minji, Taoist Ming Chung of Heavenly Ruins Country, Celestial Ingyan of Cloud Country. Cough, cough, there are many." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Not only did he not know about the nascent soul cultivators in Yangzhou and Qingzhou, he didn't even know about the nascent soul cultivators in Yuzhou. Previously, he had stayed with Taoist Li for a while, but he had rushed to Yaotai Mountain. Li Xiang was also disheartened and didn't want to talk about these things. Now, it seemed that he was really ignorant and inexperienced. Sure enough, after Zhu Qingli finished speaking, he asked with a smile, "Yuzhou is quite far from Yangzhou, so I don't know about the nascent soul seniors in Yuzhou. I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao can tell me about them?" Xiao Hua rubbed his nose. Just as he was about to speak, Taoist Yuanqing and Hong Songzi seemed to have finished their conversation. Taoist Yuanqing casually sent out a summoning talisman, and the boat rumbled again. Unexpectedly, the blue waves surged violently as it flew into the distance. Only a dozen or so attendants flew out from the boat and stood in midair. The two nascent soul cultivators turned their gazes and scanned the surroundings with their spiritual will. The two nascent soul cultivators naturally weren't looking at Xiao Hua and the others. What they cared about was the continuous stretch of tents below them. However, whether it was Chang Yu, Zhu Qingli, Wu Tianxin, or even those Taoist cultivators who stopped in midair in the distance and didn't dare to casually fly, they hurriedly bowed in greeting, fearing that they would be negligent. As a result, Xiao Hua was like a crane among chickens. How arrogant was Taoist Yuan Qing? With a single glance, he saw Xiao Hua standing there with a smile on his face. He frowned, and a strange expression flashed in his eyes. After that, his divine sense gushed toward Xiao Hua like a tidal wave. However, Xiao Hua didn't care. He was like a mountain. No matter how strong his divine sense was, he didn't care at all. Xiao Hua was naturally unharmed, but Chang Yu and the others were too close to Xiao Hua and were unavoidably affected. The three of them swayed slightly, their faces somewhat pale. Xiao Hua waved his hand, but with a flash of brilliance, Taoist Yuan Qing immediately felt as if his divine sense had been forcefully pushed back by several feet. Taoist Yuan Qing's expression immediately changed slightly. Beside him, Hong Songzi saw Xiao Hua and naturally frowned. A faint blue light flashed in his eyes, as if he was using some kind of secret technique. However, Taoist Yuan Qing's expression changed, and Hong Songzi's expression also changed because he seemed to be unable to use his secret technique to perceive Xiao Hua's cultivation. The two of them looked at each other and didn't dare to be negligent. They hurriedly flew down from the sky and cupped their hands in greeting from afar. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I know where fellow Taoists came from? Are you also here to participate in the Jadistage meeting? Seeing the two nascent soul cultivators so humble, Chang Yu and the others somewhat didn't dare to believe their eyes. They knew that Xiao Hua's cultivation was higher than theirs, but in their opinion, he was merely at the upper third grade of essence energy or the lower fourth grade of essence energy. They had never thought that a Taoist cultivator at the middle fourth grade of essence energy would be so amiable. I am Xiao Hua of Yu Province's Black Cloud Ridge. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua raised his hand to return the greeting. I am here to participate in the Jadistage meeting. Xiao Hua. Taoist Yuan Qing was even more surprised. He looked at Hong Songzi beside him, and Hong Songzi also slightly shook his head. Obviously, the two of them had never heard of Xiao Hua's name. Taoist Xiao, you're hiding your strength. If I didn't look twice, wouldn't I have missed fellow Taoist? Taoist Yuan Qing smiled. I am Taoist Yuan Qing of Yang Province's Lufeng Ridge. This is Hong Songzi of Qing Province's Cloud Dream Cave. On the hidden immortal continent, there are not many nascent soul cultivators in my Taoist sect. Since we are all here to participate in the Jadistage meeting, why don't we get to know each other? Fellow Taoists, please go ahead. Xiao Hua looked at Zhu Chengli and the others beside him and smiled. How about I pay you two a visit after I settle down? Okay, Hong Songzi looked at Xiao Hua's surroundings. He knew that Xiao Hua didn't bring any attendants with him. He nodded and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, please take a rest first. Later, I will send some attendants to invite fellow Taoist. I'll follow fellow Taoist's arrangement. Xiao Hua smiled and agreed. Soon after, the two of them cupped their hands toward Xiao Hua and flew away. They brought along a dozen attendants and landed in the palace at the foot of Yaotai Mountain. Senior Xiao, Chang Yu smiled bitterly and said, Senior, you've really played with this junior. These past few days, you've really made this junior lose face. Haha, since you know this Xiao's temper, then there's no need to be so polite. Xiao Hua saw the respect in Chang Yu's tone and the smile on his face. He knew that Chang Yu had already grasped his temper. You all follow this Xiao to the palace used by nascent soul cultivators. Yes, Junior will listen to Senior Zhao's instructions. Chang Yu and Zhu Chengli's voices were rather respectful. However, Wu Tianxin seemed to be a bit reserved. After all, he had complained a lot along the way. Thinking about it now, he felt very embarrassed. Chang Yu, you lead the way, Xiao Hua instructed. Chang Yu took the lead and flew towards Yaotai Mountain. The crowd in the distance and many people in the underground tent saw this scene. They all whispered in the distance. They didn't dare to sweep their divine senses over. They looked over again and again, wanting to know what was so special about Xiao Hua. Of course, the eyes of the man who was hiding at the side of the tent flashed with ecstasy. He stared straight at the place where Xiao Hua landed. He seemed to have made a decision. Unfortunately, Even when Xiao Hua landed at the foot of Yaotai Mountain with Chang Yu and the others, they still didn't discover anything. At the foot of Yaotai Mountain, the palaces were different from the pavilions. They had different styles and sizes. Many of the palaces were already flashing with brilliance. The restrictions inside had already been activated. It was obvious that there were already people inside. However, there weren't many of these palaces. Xiao Hua took a glance and knew that there were about 20 of them. These 20 or so palaces were naturally the minority, but the number made Xiao Hua's heart startled. These were nascent soul cultivators, on Dawn Rain Continent. They were already grandmaster figures who established their own sections. How many nascent soul cultivators appeared in the Sword Dao Great War? On this small Yaodai mountain, on the hidden immortal continent, where Confucian cultivators stood in great numbers, there were actually 20 nascent soul cultivators all of a sudden. How could Xiao Hua not be shocked? Of course, after thinking about it a little, Xiao Hua had some understanding. Although the Dawn Rain Continent was a flourishing Dao sect, its territory couldn't be considered vast. It didn't seem to be as big as the hidden immortal continent. Moreover, when he was on the Dawn Rain Continent, although he already had nascent soul strength, he was still a gold core cultivator. Even before the Sword Dao War, he was still a Foundation Establishment disciple. Even if the Dawn Rain Continent had a grand event like the Yaotai Conference, he couldn't participate. How many nascent soul cultivators could he know? Take the Imperial Thunder sect as an example. At most, he had seen the 8 palace masters. Who knew if there were any more powerful elders? Senior, what do you think of this palace? Seeing Xiao Hua not speaking, Chang Yu pointed at a rather exquisite small palace and asked in a low voice. And here it is. Xiao Hua had never had any requirements for these things. He nodded and answered. Then, he swept his divine sense and immediately found that there was a strange magic power fluctuation at the palace gate. When he probed with his divine sense, he only felt that the jade carving of a horsetail whisk outside the palace gate gave birth to a very weak suction force. Thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua looked at the brilliance of the palace beside him and sent out his divine sense. In an instant, a strong suction force rushed out from the jade carving. Just as Xiao Hua frowned, it suddenly stopped. Then, a palm-sized jade tablet rushed out from the jade carving's horsetail whisk. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the jade tablet appeared in his hand. He looked at it with his divine sense and said with a smile, "So that's how it is. This so-called Star-Lord Palace is also interesting. All the decorations and restrictions are Dao sect magic. There's no trace of Confucian cultivation at all. I'm afraid if it's too much, it will make us Dao sect disciples feel disgusted," Zhu Chengli said in a low voice. "Quick!" Xiao Hua touched the jade tablet with his hand. The jade tablet immediately emitted a cluster of light that rushed into the palace door. The palace door lit up as if it was the finishing touch. The light began to spread along the palace walls and other places. Not long after, layers of Dao talisman scripts appeared on the entire palace walls. "Let's go in." Xiao Hua waved his hand again, and the jade tablet fell on the palace gate. The palace gate silently opened, revealing the splendor inside. The 4 people walked into the palace and released their divine sense. After a little exploration, they all smiled. This palace only had 4 quiet rooms, 1 big and 3 small. There was no need to divide them. "Senior Xiao, Junior will take his leave first." Chang Yu bowed first. "I'll pay my respects to Senior tomorrow. No need to be so polite." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "The Jade Pavilion gathering will be in 10 days. It's better for you all to cultivate quietly. Even if you can't get the Imperial Teacher's lot, it's also good to get some rare spirit fruits." Yes. Senior, please rest. Junior will take his leave." Zhu Chengli hurriedly bowed and saluted. Following Chang Yu, Wu Tianxin and the other 2 didn't need to discuss anything. They each occupied a quiet room. Chapter 3579. Chang Yu and the others were filled with thoughts in the quiet room. They were surprised by their encounters these days. If there was a pen in the cave, they might have written some stories about nascent soul cultivators. When Xiao Hua entered the quiet room, That quiet room was different from the splendor of the palace hall. It looked very simple and crude. Other than a jade bed, there was nothing else. Xiao Hua released his soul consciousness and scanned the room. He didn't find anything out of the ordinary. With a wave of his hand, he took out 100 jade talismans and placed them around the room. After activating the capital star formation, he sat cross-legged on the jade bed and reached out to take Xiansong Zi's ink cloud pupil from the dragon vein. He released his divine sense and carefully studied it. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Hua suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the entrance of the quiet room. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes. Then, Xiao Hua gave the ink cloud pupil to Dragon Vein Xiao Hua. He waved his hand, and the entrance of the quiet room flashed. He said, "Wu Tianxin, what's the matter?" At the door was Wu Tianxin, a middle gold core stage cultivator, waiting. At this moment, hearing Xiao Hua's voice, a complicated expression appeared on Wu Tianxin's face. He turned around to look at the empty palace, clenched his teeth, and quickly walked into the quiet room. Before he reached the center of the quiet room, he actually knelt on the ground with a plop and begged, "Senior Xiao, please save this junior's life." What do you mean? Xiao Hua didn't expect Wu Tianxin to kneel and ask him to save his life. He didn't see anything unusual with Wu Tianxin along the way. Xiao Hua could only wave his sleeve and lift Wu Tianxin up. He said anxiously, "Get up and tell me in detail." "Oh, don't worry. Even if Taoist Yuan Qing wants your life, as long as you are in the right, I will help you." Yes, Wu Tianxin asked Xiao Hua for help. It could only be because of a grudge with a nascent soul cultivator. If it was most likely, then it was Taoist Yuan Qing. "Thank you, senior." Wu Tianxin took advantage of the situation and stood up. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, he smiled bitterly and said, "Senior, you're thinking too much." Although Junior's mouth is not virtuous and likes to nag when encountering problems, and even somewhat cynical, Junior still has self-awareness and will absolutely not offend someone who shouldn't be offended. "Oh, what could it be?" Xiao Hua asked curiously. "Tell me about it first. This old man will also think about it and see how I can help you." "Senior," Wu Tianxin looked at Xiao Hua. He was somewhat hesitant. Then he asked tentatively if this junior says that this junior doesn't have anything to ask for senior's help right now, but this junior would like to ask senior to save this junior's life in the future. Well, perhaps at the Jade Pavilion conference, would senior believe me? Xiao Hua smiled and nodded. "Of course I believe you. Why wouldn't this old man believe you?" Looking at Xiao Hua's calm appearance, Wu Tianxin was extremely disappointed. He sighed and said, "Senior Xiao, Junior knows that you don't believe Junior, but I really want to ask you to save my life in the future." "Hee, Wu Tianxin, this old man has already said that I believe you. Why don't you believe me?" Xiao Hua said with a smile, "You also underestimate the magical abilities of us nascent soul cultivators too much. Not to mention that the Jade Pavilion conference is close at hand. This old man and other nascent soul cultivators can sense good and bad luck on a whim. Even if an ominous omen several months later, this old man and other nascent soul cultivators can still sense it. What Junior said is not the same as what Senior said." Wu Tianxin bit his lips and said in a low voice, "Junior's cultivation is not that high. Junior can only sense that my life is at stake. If I can't find someone to help me in time, I may die at any time. That's a bit strange." Xiao Hua looked pensive. He looked at Wu Tianxin and said with a smile, "Since you know that the Jade Pavilion conference points to disaster, why did you still come thousands of miles to Yaotai Mountain? Of course, even if you came to Yaotai Mountain, you wouldn't have participated in the Jade Pavilion conference at the beginning. Wouldn't that have been fine?" "Senior." Wu Tianxin was on the verge of tears. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Senior, do you believe that there is someone who knows what might happen 10,000 miles away from Yaotai Mountain tomorrow? Or that someone related to this person will appear 10,000 miles away tomorrow? Isn't it just a divination technique? Or it's called foresight?" Xiao Hua was not surprised. He said with a smile, "Could it be that you know this technique?" Wu Tianxin was stunned. It was as if he was struck by lightning. He looked at Xiao Hua foolishly. After a long while, He did not answer Xiao Hua's question and asked, Senior Xiao, do you know this technique? I know a little. Xiao Hua did not hide it. He said with a smile, It's just that this old man's cultivation is shallow and has only touched the surface. Senior, save me. Wu Tianxin said no more. He knelt down and kowtowed again. Xiao Hua was displeased. He did not help Wu Tianxin up and said indifferently, Wu Tianxin, since you asked me to save you, why are you hiding it and not daring to say it? How can there be such a logic in begging others in this world? This is also because this old man knows that although your mouth is not good, your character is not bad. Otherwise, I would absolutely not agree. Senior, please forgive me. This junior knows his mistake. Wu Tianxin did not dare to get up. He said in a low voice, This junior is also afraid. This junior's cultivation is not as good as senior's, but this junior also knows the principle that an ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. Speak, what is it? Xiao Hua waved his hand. This old man will not covet your secret divination technique. Wu Tianxin clenched his teeth and said in a low voice, Senior, can you open the restrictions on the quiet room? Xiao Hua smiled. He knew that Wu Tianxin was worried. He waved his hand, and the capital star array was activated. Wu Tianxin released his divine sense. Seeing that his divine sense could not penetrate the array, he felt relieved and began to explain his situation. After Xiao Hua finished listening to Wu Tianxin's words, although he had already expected it, he was still dumbfounded. This was because Wu Tianxin was somewhat similar to Lu Yi. He had a kind of innate talent that allowed him to distinguish between good and bad. Wu Tianxin also relied on this ability to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. At the beginning, his cultivation path could be considered smooth sailing. After his cultivation reached the fusion stage, which was the peak of the aura refining realm, he inadvertently obtained an incomplete nameless cultivation technique. This cultivation technique's words were obscure, and others could not understand it at all. However, Wu Tianxin relied on his own intuition and knew that this thing was very important to him. He spent a total of 200 years comprehending it. In the end, although he was not proficient in it, he still had a basic understanding of it and knew that this was a mysterious divination technique. However, at this point, it was impossible for Wu Tianxin to comprehend it further. No matter how he racked his brains and tried to think of a way, he could not comprehend even the slightest bit. Wu Tianxin was naturally unwilling. At first, he took a part of this thing to ask others for guidance. No one with the same cultivation as him could understand it. As for those with higher cultivation than him, he did not dare to be too ostentatious. Every time, he would first sense whether or not it was safe before taking out the thing to ask for guidance. However, how could human nature be measured by his half-baked divination technique? There were many times when he almost lost his life in the hands of others. Later, he no longer dared to take risks. He would rather think hard than ask others for guidance. This was also the reason why Wu Tianxin's words were usually very cynical. It was also the reason why Wu Tianxin did not dare to explain it to Xiao Hua. Relying on the divination technique that Wu Tianxin did not understand, relying on his innate intuition, Wu Tianxin felt that he was about to face a great tribulation several decades ago. This great tribulation was not related to cultivation, but what it was specifically and where it would appear, he did not understand. In these several decades, Wu Tianxin cultivated day and night in order to improve his strength so that he could deal with the great tribulation. However, even though Wu Tianxin had already cultivated to the middle stage of Jindan and could be considered as a somewhat famous Taoist cultivator in Yangzhou, the feeling of dark clouds pressing down on him did not disappear. Instead, it became more and more intense. Especially in recent years, Wu Tianxin almost felt like he could not breathe. Wu Tianxin simply stopped cultivating. Instead, he spent nearly 10 years calmly divining according to the secret divination technique. In the end, Wu Tianxin vaguely knew that he absolutely could not overcome this difficulty. Moreover, his opportunity was not in Yangzhou, not in the Panshan cave. However, he did not know where it was or who to ask for help. At this time, it just so happened that Zhu Chengli of Shihu Mountain invited Wu Tianxin to go to Yaotai Mountain to participate in the Yaotai Assembly. Normally, Wu Tianxin, who had no interest in ruling a country, would absolutely not agree. However, at this time, his heart was moved. He knew that this was an opportunity. Perhaps he could find his own way out. Therefore, Wu Tianxin went out with Zhu Chengli. Unfortunately, Wu Tianxin first met Changyu. Changyu's character was not bad, but his attitude as a senior made Wu Tianxin feel uncomfortable. Especially when Wu Tianxin asked about some divination techniques. Changyu did not know anything. Wu Tianxin was discouraged. He only wanted to go to Yaotai Mountain and ask other Yuanian cultivators to take a look. When he met Xiaohua, Wu Tianxin simply did not care. Xiaohua was really too used to being a low-level cultivator. Wu Tianxin simply did not see a trace of Xiaohua's awareness as a Yuanian cultivator. Xiaohua's whole body was filled with amiability and amiability. Therefore, Wu Tianxin did not have the heart to ask him for help. Only when Xiaohua's depth was seen through by Taoist Master Yuan Qing and the others did Wu Tianxin become vigilant. When Wu Tianxin hid in a quiet room and once again used divination techniques, he suddenly discovered that he was really in imminent danger. Moreover, this danger seemed to be on Yaotai Mountain. Just when Wu Tianxin was in despair, he discovered a trace of life. As for where this life was, how could Wu Tianxin know with his current cultivation level? And Xiaohua was naturally the only water plant that Wu Tianxin could grasp. Alas, this is really unimaginable. Xiaohua sighed. If you weren't on Yaotai Mountain, perhaps you wouldn't have to worry about your life. However, it was precisely because you sensed a life force outside the Pan Mountain Cave that you came to Yaotai Mountain. Tell me, should you come to Yaotai Mountain in the end? Even if you don't want to come, even if you want to go back now, don't you also sense a certain death situation? Wu Tianxin nodded with a sullen face. Obviously, he himself had long sensed it and used divination techniques to divine it. Chapter 3580. You can get up. Xiaohua waved his hand. Presumably, you would never mention this to Zhu Chengli and Changyu, right? Junior doesn't dare to speak casually. Wu Tianxin got up and said in a low voice, "Then, do you think I was able to save you because of your divination technique?" Xiaohua asked again. Wu Tianxin shook his head. Junior can't divine this. However, Junior already has this kind of perception. Xiaohua shook his head with a smile. I'm afraid it's not perception, but what you think. You only know me as a nascent soul cultivator in the entire Yaotai Mountain. Who else can you find if not me? Junior's mind is already in a mess. Wu Tianxin didn't know what to say and said helplessly, Junior didn't intend to participate in the Yaotai conference before, but now it seems that I must participate and will inevitably encounter great danger. If possible, I asked Senior to save me. That's not a problem. Xiaohua simply agreed. If I can help you, I will naturally help you. Thank you, Senior, thank you. Wu Tianxin hurriedly thanked him. Also, Xiaohua asked again, did you perceive your own danger or the danger of the Yaotai conference? What danger will there be in the Yaotai conference? Wu Tianxin was puzzled. Junior can only perceive my own danger, and the divination technique didn't show any danger in the Yaotai conference. And Xiaohua responded thoughtfully. He understood that he had been comprehending the hand of karma for so many years, but he still couldn't accurately perceive karma. Wu Tianxin's cultivation was even worse. If he didn't have an innate talent, he probably wouldn't be able to perceive some things now. Then Junior will take his leave. Wu Tianxin clenched his teeth and said in a low voice. Xiaohua smiled and said, don't worry. Since you want to participate in the Yaotai conference, follow me. If there are any benefits, I will give it to you. If you encounter any difficulties, I will definitely help you. Junior doesn't dare to say too much about Senior's great kindness at this time. It won't be too late to say more after Junior escapes this disaster. Wu Tianxin bowed again and waited for Xiaohua to remove the restriction of the quiet room before slowly leaving. Things in this world are really interesting. There are so many capable people. Looking at Wu Tianxin's somewhat excited back, A trace of a smile hung on the corner of Xiao Hua's mouth. Since the hidden immortal continent is like this, the Dawn Rain continent must also be like this. Unfortunately, this Zhao's cultivation was really shallow when he was in the Dawn Rain continent, so he couldn't see things as high as this. Jiuxia. Very naturally, the mysterious Jiuxia, who could predict the future, appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Of course, compared to Jiuxia's beauty, the importance of being able to predict the future in Xiao Hua's heart was still far behind. Seeing that Xiao Hua's expression was a little dazed, the silver-gray color in his eyes gradually rose, and the traces of the galaxy suddenly appeared. Outside the quiet room, the sound of footsteps sounded again. A faint green light flashed between Xiao Hua's eyebrows. His eyes slightly shook, and those pitch-black eyes of his regained their color. In fact, Xiao Hua didn't need to look anymore. He already knew who it was. Sure enough, before long, the smile on Zhu Qingli's face was like a flower. The spirit pills bestowed by Xiao Hua were exactly what he needed. Under his pleading, Xiao Hua even gave him a nascent soul cultivation method. Of course, as for whether or not he could cultivate to the nascent soul stage, that was not something Xiao Hua could know. At this time, Xiao Hua simply didn't comprehend any cultivation method. He took out a scroll and read it with great interest. Confucian cultivators were the same as Taoist cultivators. Both good and bad were mixed. However, the scrolls left behind by Confucian cultivators for so many years were the real deal. The vast number of articles were filled with penetrating insight. Every time he read an article, every time he read a scroll, Xiao Hua could feel the writer's heart and experience the awe-inspiring intent within. Fujiwen was right. The awe-inspiring aura was the foundation, but the awe-inspiring aura itself was dead. It was the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, and it was the breathing of Confucian cultivators that gave the awe-inspiring aura vitality. This vitality was precipitated in the awe-inspiring aura. Whether it was thousands of years, 10,000 years, or hundreds of millions of years, as long as there were Confucian cultivators and articles passed down, the awe-inspiring aura would exist. This kind of inheritance was beyond the reach of Taoist cultivators. Sometimes, Xiao Hua even had an illusion that the awe-inspiring aura inheritance of Confucian cultivators was borrowed from the inheritance in the mind of the evil spirit. Of course, Xiao Hua's Buddhist Sarira was also studying Buddhist scriptures and cultivating Buddhist Dharma. It was similarly broad and profound, causing the Buddhist Sarira to be intoxicated. Now, the time it spent studying Buddhist scriptures had exceeded the time it spent cultivating Dharma. If Xiao Hua hadn't come into contact with the scrolls of Confucian cultivators before, he would have ordered the Buddha relic to focus on cultivating Buddhist doctrine. However, after looking at the scrolls and Buddhist doctrine, Xiao Hua knew that Buddhist scriptures were the foundation of Buddhist doctrine. Buddhist doctrine was only a minor detail. Looking at Guzhan's situation and looking at Manjushri Bodhisattva's fruit, if he focused on Buddhist doctrine, it would really be putting the cart before the horse, picking up sesame seeds and throwing away watermelons. Demons, how do they cultivate? In an instant, Xiao Hua, who was reading the scrolls, was distracted again. When he was in the Dawn Rain continent, Xiao Hua had seen beast cultivators. At first, he thought that they should be formed by combining weapon cultivators and demon cultivators. However, ordinary demon cultivators, as the name implied, were cultivators who cultivated demonic arts. Since they were cultivators, they were humans. On the hidden immortal continent, whether it was Taoist cultivators, Confucian cultivators, or Buddhist cultivators, they could all be called cultivators. However, the demons of the Thousand Demons sacred realm were different. They were not humans. Moreover, according to High Wind Old Monster, they never considered themselves as cultivators. Therefore, they could not be called demon cultivators because they were demons or evil spirits. According to what I know, and the gradually growing memories of Little Yellow and Little Black, they should be imprints of inheritance, just like the phoenix imprint on Fairy Hongxia's forehead. Since Fairy Hongxia and other cultivators with genuine bloodlines can obtain the inheritance of these imprints, then wouldn't the demons be even more privileged? If that's the case, then what about the 2 bones in the demon formation of Qianyu Mountain? There seem to be some runes on the bones. Then how do you explain the stellar energy that the demon formation drew upon? Xiao Hua thought more and more. After a long while, the entire palace was silent, as if there was no one around. Suddenly, Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows, looked at the book in his hand, smiled, and muttered to himself, "If I don't understand the cultivation techniques of the Buddhist sect, then I have no place to ask, but how does this demon cultivate? Why should I think so much? With these 2 children, Little Yellow and Little Black, what do I have to worry about? When they come back, can't I just ask them properly?" With that thought in mind, Xiao Hua once again concentrated on reading the book. At the top of his head, wisps of clear air were produced, slowly dissipating. Half a day passed unknowingly. Xiao Hua put down the book, stretched, and casually swept his gaze across the quiet room. The restriction outside the quiet room was not activated, and said with a smile, "This fellow Chong, you can keep his composure. Looks like he's a somewhat shrewd cultivator." Just as Xiao Hua was about to pick up the book again, he frowned, and said with a helpless smile, "Chong, you didn't come, but Taoist Yuan Qin did." However, when he released his divine sense to investigate, a strange expression appeared on his face, and he asked curiously, "Why did he come to Yaodai Mountain?" Soon after, Xiao Hua stood up again and said with a smile, "No matter what, he's an old friend. I have to personally welcome him." Xiao Hua walked out of the quiet room, and Chang Yu immediately sensed it. He hurriedly came out of the quiet room, bowed, and said, "Senior Xiao, is there something wrong?" "Nothing. You wait here and meditate. This old man has an old friend coming to visit." Xiao Hua waved his hand. Chang Yu did not ask any more, and returned to the quiet room with cupped hands. Xiao Hua walked to the palace door, and with a wave of his hand, the palace door flashed with brilliance and silently opened again. Outside the palace door stood a person with a large head. On the face of this head, there was a pair of broom-like eyebrows and 2 leopard eyes. Previously, there was shock in those eyes, but now it was replaced with fear and surprise. Wasn't this the Black Horse cavalry general of the left, Xue Ping? "I'm late. Fellow Taoist Xue has been waiting for a long time," Xiao Hua said with a smile. Xue Ping hurriedly bowed and said, "Junior Xue Ping greets Senior Xiao. Previously, I really didn't know Senior Xiao's true identity. I was too rude. Please forgive me." It's fine, it's fine." Xiao Hua helped Xue Ping up and said, "Those who don't know are not guilty." At that time, this old man was only traveling in the country of Xi and did not intend to let more people know my identity. It would be strange if fellow Taoist Xue found out. "Senior, please call me Xue Ping. Otherwise this junior will feel awkward." Xue Ping stood up and said pitifully, his face full of embarrassment. That's right, that day, Xue Ping aggressively tested Xiao Hua's strength, and even wanted to promote Xiao Hua to the position of right general. Who would have thought that in just a year, he would become a nascent soul senior? This leap was so big that Xue Ping felt like he was in a dream. Therefore, when Xue Ping was standing beside the tent, he did not dare to approach, and only now did he make up his mind to pay his respects. Xiao Hua nodded, turned around and said, "This old man understands. You may come in." "Yes." Xue Ping nodded obediently and followed Xiao Hua into the palace. Xiao Hua did not return to the quiet room, but sat at the head of the palace. Xue Ping naturally did not dare to overstep, and stood respectfully in front of the jade table, quietly waiting for Xiao Hua to speak. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out a jade plate containing some spirit fruits. He placed it on the jade table beside him and said with a smile, "Xue Ping, have a seat. Have a taste of the spirit fruits first, then we can talk slowly." "Yes, this junior thanks senior for the fruit." Xue Ping did not dare to be negligent. After bowing and thanking him, he sat down and picked up a spirit fruit to taste carefully. Seeing that Xue Ping was still so reserved, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Xue Ping, why did you come to Yaotai Mountain instead of being the left general in the country of Xi's Nanpu County? It seems that your cultivation is not enough to be the state preceptor. Could it be that you came here specifically to wait for this old man? Could it be that you have the ability to predict the future? Chapter 3581. Xiaohua was obviously joking, but when Xue Ping heard it, his heart calmed down. He hurriedly put down the spirit fruit and said respectfully, "Senior, please know that I'm no longer the left general. Oh, I should say that I'm no longer in the country of Shi's Nanpu County." Oh, Xiaohua raised his brows and asked curiously, "You were doing well in the country of Shi's Nanpu County. Why did you go somewhere else?" At this point, Xiaohua hurriedly smiled and said, "Oh, that's right. I remember that I had an agreement with you. However, because I really didn't have the time to leave, I kept delaying it. Don't worry." Eh? Did you already go there? And you returned with a full load, so you're no longer working in the country of Shi? No, it's not what Senior thinks. Xue Ping hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Without an expert like Senior leading the way, I wouldn't dare to go there. If Senior has the time in the future and wants to go there, I'm willing to bring you there." "I see." Xiaohua scratched his chin and nodded. "After the Yaodai summit, I will have some free time. If you have the time, why don't we travel together?" "Great, great." Xue Ping was overjoyed and scratched his head. Xiaohua looked at Xue Ping with a faint smile and said, "Xue Ping, don't tell me you chased me all the way to Yaotai Mountain and wanted me to fulfill my promise?" Xue Ping hurriedly reined in his joy and smiled apologetically. "Senior Xiao, you're mistaken. How could I know that Senior would come to Yaotai Mountain? I'm only following my general to Yaotai Mountain." "Oh," Xiaohua nodded. "It seems like you had a fortuitous encounter after leaving the country of Shi." Xue Ping smiled bitterly. "Senior, you must be joking. How could I have a fortuitous encounter? It's better to say that I was forced to leave the country of Shi. Have a seat. Let's talk while eating." Xiaohua smiled and pointed at the spirit fruits on Xue Ping's table. He took out some spirit fruits and took a bite. Seeing Xiaohua's behavior, Xue Ping was somewhat relieved. He squeezed out a smile on his face that was as black as the bottom of a pot. He picked up a spirit fruit from the table and took a few bites. "Senior, you're really enjoying yourself. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed such a wondrous spirit fruit." "It's nothing. It's just a small token of appreciation from some juniors. It would be impolite for this old man to refuse," Xiaohua said with a slight smile. Xue Ping ate a few spirit fruits before wiping his mouth and smiling embarrassedly. "Senior, I was ordered by the prefectural governor to go to Longevity Town to provide disaster relief. Thanks to Senior's grain, the townspeople didn't suffer too much of a disaster. With the help of Mo Yin and Mo Jianli, this junior has also successfully completed the important task of disaster relief. However, even though I had completed my mission, something unexpected happened when I was about to leave Longevity Town." Xue Ping stole a glance at Xiaohua's expression. Xiaohua seemed to be tasting the spirit fruits while listening to Xue Ping's explanation. Seeing that Xue Ping had stopped, he raised his head naturally and asked curiously, "What's wrong? What could possibly happen in Longevity Town that you didn't expect?" "This old man hasn't heard any news from Longevity Town for a long time after I left. I do miss the monks of Shaojin Temple." "Ha!" Xue Ping chuckled. "Senior, you're truly a playboy. With your cultivation, I'm afraid you could destroy the Shaojin Temple with a single finger. I heard from Mo Jianli that you even..." However, at this point, Xue Ping's expression suddenly changed. If Xiaohua's fight with the monks of the small gold temple was considered a game of the mortal world, then Xiaohua's battle with Liao Jiang, what kind of game was that? No matter how much Xiaohua played around, he couldn't treat the lives of the townspeople of Longevity Town as child's play. He even gave the credit of defeating the sea race to the Buddhist sect Hang. This didn't make sense at all. Xiaohua pondered for a moment. He knew what Xue Ping was thinking and smiled. This old man was injured that day, and my cultivation was greatly reduced. Otherwise, how could I have allowed the sea race to run rampant in Liaojiang? Even you, didn't you give this old man a shock too? Xue Ping came to a realization and hurriedly smiled. Senior really didn't show his true colors that day. This junior really couldn't tell. Ping did not dare to ask any more questions. He continued, Senior, there is something you don't know. Ever since Buddhist sect's master C.I. Hang blocked the Sea tribe at Liao River and used a Buddhist sect's Buddhist artifact to collect the river water that was supposed to flood Longevity Town, he obtained the psyche power of tens of thousands of townspeople in Longevity Town. He almost attained the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit in Longevity Town. The townspeople of Longevity Town have regarded Master C.I. Hang as their savior. Not only did they worship Longevity Town's memorial tablet at home every day, they also went to Shao Jin Temple to offer incense and recite the virtues of Guanyin Bodhisattva. Previously, in Long Life Town, Long Life Academy was still the leader. That small gold temple really wasn't much, only a bit better than the River and Tide Temple when Senior first arrived in Long Life Town. However, with the worship of tens of thousands of villagers, Small Gold Temple's incense offerings flourished 100 times. Oh, the Jiangshao Temple where you stayed that day is no longer there. It's said that they're going to build a Guanyin monastery. Not only are the townspeople of Longevity Town so crazy, the entire country of Shi and the other countries in your province, be it the devout townspeople or the monks of various temples, all of them are flocking to Longevity Town as if they're on a pilgrimage. They're heading to Shao Jin Temple and Guanyin Monastery to worship Guanyin Bodhisattva. Senior, you must have seen clearly that day that C.I. Hang was only one step away from attaining the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. However, in reality, he didn't attain the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. Ping continued, However, according to the mouths of those foolish townspeople, C.I. Hang actually attained the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. They even want to forge a 10-foot golden body for Guanyin Bodhisattva on Jiangshao Ridge. Furthermore, I've heard that many people feel that Jiangshao Ridge is too small to accommodate Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. They're prepared to either completely demolish Jiangshao Ridge and build on the flat ground or pile up soil to build a mountain around Jiangshao Ridge, expanding the area of Jiangshao Ridge tenfold. Hiss! Xiaohua gasped and asked curiously, although the north of Jiangshao Ridge is barren, there are farmlands and farmhouses in the east and west. How are they going to demolish them or pile up soil to build a mountain? Ping smiled bitterly. Senior, you might not know this, but the townspeople near Jiangshao Ridge know that it's for Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. They've long donated the farmlands and left with their families. Sigh. Xiaohua sighed. Longevity Town is now a monk town filled with bald people. A tile fell and injured 10 people. 6 of them were monks who came to Longevity Town, while the other 4 were devotees who came to offer incense. Ping continued, Longevity Town belongs to Nanpu County. When the county governor found out about this, he had a huge headache and hurriedly reported it to the king. I don't know about the king's decree, but ever since the king's decree, the entire Nanpu County has been shrouded in a strange atmosphere. On the surface, Nanpu County seems to be very peaceful, and the government and people are normal. However, there's an undercurrent surging within. Not only have some Confucian cultivators secretly come, but many Taoist cultivators have also revealed themselves. As the first person to render meritorious service in Longevity Town, I've received many rewards. There's even a rumor that the king intends to give me the position of general to guard Longevity Town. The more I think about it, the more scared I feel. These Confucian cultivators must have a huge conflict with the Buddhist sect in Longevity Town. They can play whatever they want, but why are they involving us Taoist cultivators? As a Taoist disciple and expose myself, I'll definitely be the first to be sent out if there's any strange movement. If I don't go by then, I'll be disobeying the king's decree. Not to mention the king, even the county governor can take my head. However, if I go, will the Buddhist sect's Dharma protector let me live in peace? I'm sure that the demon subduing pestle is already waiting to land on my head, right? Thus, I might as well go all out and submit a letter to the county governor to resign, saying that I've reached a critical point in my cultivation of a secret technique that involves my life. The prefectural governor did not agree at first, but this junior submitted 3 dictionaries in a row. In the end, The prefectural governor remembered this junior's hard work and finally agreed. This junior received the confirmation and left Nanpu County on the same day. Not bad. You're able to see clearly when to advance and when to retreat. Xiaohua nodded. After all, the situation in Longevity Town was really strange. Xueping was able to see so far despite being in the middle of it, which surprised Xiaohua. Then where are you now? I'm currently serving as a county governor in Puqian County in Liang Province's Shanliang country. Xueping didn't dare to hide anything and answered honestly. Xiaohua smiled and clapped. Not bad, not bad. You used to be the left general. Now that you're a county governor, you've improved. Speaking up to this point, Xiaohua was suddenly stunned as though he thought of something. He exclaimed, "Oh, that's not right. Xueping, this Shanliang country seems to be established by the Buddhist sect. You're not serving in the country established by the Taoist sect. Why did you go from a Confucian country to a Buddhist sect country?" Xueping blinked his eyes. He was very surprised that Xiaohua knew that the Shanliang country was established by the Buddhist sect. However, he didn't dare to ask and could only answer, "Senior, you might not know. My cultivation in Tao isn't profound, but I have some unique points in the art of war and spear arts. If I went to the country established by the Taoist sect, there might not be a position that I'm satisfied with. Only a country established by the Buddhist sect or a country established by the Confucian sect can satisfy me. Among them, the descendants of the Confucian school of the military are also skilled in the art of war. I found a few Confucian countries, but I wasn't satisfied. When I arrived at the Shanliang country, although I'm not too fond of the Buddhist sect, the people in the Shanliang country are simple and honest, and the Buddhist aura is exuberant. The country's ruler is also a kind-hearted person. Compared to the few Confucian countries nearby, it's much better. Therefore, I attempted to serve the Puqian County governor. Coincidentally, the Puqian County governor was lacking someone like me who knew how to lead troops and set up formations. After trying, he was very satisfied and immediately petitioned the king to request for the position of left general for me. What surprised me even more was that the king's decree actually allowed me to become the county governor's army. Not only will I control the Puqian County's military and political power, but I'll also assist the county governor in handling government affairs. He doesn't care about my identity as a Taoist sect cultivator at all. The king's breadth of mind. TSK, I'm truly impressed. Chapter 3582. Oh, the monarch of the Chanyang kingdom is so wise. Xiaohua was a little confused. It seemed that in Xiao Jian's words, the monarch of the Chaoyang country was a cruel person, an ungrateful person, extremely unbearable. Why was it so different from Xueping's description? This monarch, what is his name? If we're talking about the monarch's name, it has something to do with Senior Xiao, Xueping said with a smile. My monarch's surname is Xiao, and his name is Jun. He's a loyal monarch. Xiao Jun? Xiaohua frowned. Wasn't this the shameless person Xiao Jian mentioned who stole his throne? Actually, I came to Yaotai Mountain because I took the initiative to request the monarch to send people to recruit some Dao cultivators. Xueping continued. After all, although my Chanyang kingdom has a strong population, it might not be rich. I feel that we urgently need some people with lofty ideals to help our monarch govern the country and prevent other countries from harboring ill intentions towards my Chanyang kingdom. Don't tell me you were bribed by a mere county governor joining the army? Xiaohua said with a smile. Don't forget that you're a Dao cultivator. You're not a Buddhist kingdom's bodhisattva. Senior, you're wrong. When Xueping heard that, he answered righteously, of course I won't abandon my principles just because a prefectural governor has joined the army. I still don't approve of the Buddhist sect, but that doesn't mean I don't approve of a Buddhist kingdom or the monarch of a Buddhist kingdom. My monarch seems to know about the Yaotai meeting, but he didn't think about it before. When he saw this junior's memorial, he immediately made a decision. Not only did he approve this junior's memorial, he even personally brought some aides to Yaotai Mountain. Xiaohua smiled. So Xiao Jun is also at Yaotai Mountain. That's right. Shui Ping nodded. When Senior flew over, I was chatting with my monarch's aides and was delayed. When I saw Senior's face, I didn't dare to approach. Later, when I saw a nascent soul Senior, I had to be courteous to Senior. Only then did I muster the courage to come over. If Senior is willing, I'll invite my monarch to pay you a visit. Xiao Hua's heart stirred as he asked. You told the county governor of Butian Commandery about Longevity Town, right? That's right. I have nothing to hide. Shui Ping nodded. Then, have you told your monarch about this old man's visit today? Junior wouldn't dare. Longevity Town's matters are Junior's own. Junior naturally dares to speak. But Senior's matter, I dare not speak rashly without Senior's approval. Shui Ping immediately said in a panic. Xiao Hua nodded. That's good. You don't need to tell others about this old man's matters. If this old man is interested, he can come and find you. Yes, this Junior understands. Shui Ping hastily stood up, knowing that Xiao Hua was about to send him off. However, when he stood up, he still didn't forget to say, Senior, if you have the time, this Junior would like to invite His Majesty to meet you. Although this Junior hasn't met His Majesty much, I have a good relationship with His Majesty's aides. All the advisors know the monarch very well. Their reputation towards the monarch is extremely good. Xiao Hua frowned and said with a smile that was not a smile, Shui Ping, are you just here to be the Buddhist sex lobbyist? Oh, please forgive me, Senior. Shui Ping hastily shut his mouth and said with a smile, this Junior is used to speaking these days, so I just said it in passing. This is my message talisman. If Senior returns from the Yao Dai gathering with a full load, this Junior will come and congratulate Senior. With that said, Shui Ping carefully took out a message talisman and handed it to Xiao Hua, looking at him pitifully. It seemed that he was still worried when Xiao Hua said that he would look for him when he had the time. Xiao Hua reached out to take it without any displeasure on his face. Only then did Shui Ping feel relieved. He looked around and said, Senior is already a nascent soul cultivator. Why don't you have a boy to serve you? If Senior needs one, can this Junior send a few over? There's no need for that. Xiao Hua was somewhat speechless. He waved his hand and said, I'm just here to take a stroll around Yaotai Mountain. Why would I need a boy to serve me? Those who came with me earlier were also people I met along the way. They can't be considered as disciples. Senior is really amiable and approachable. Shui Ping sighed. If this Junior cultivates to the nascent soul realm, I'll definitely have someone to rely on like perfected Yuanqing. This is something that a nascent soul Senior should enjoy. It won't be too late to talk about it after you cultivate to the nascent soul realm. Xiao Hua said with a smile and then walked to see him off. How could Shui Ping dare to let Xiao Hua see him off? He hurriedly bowed and said, Senior, please wait. This Junior doesn't dare to trouble you. Senior Xiao, let this Junior see this fellow Taoist off. With that said, Changyu quickly walked out of the quiet room and said eagerly, I'm Changyu. Fellow Taoist, this way please. Xiao Huan nodded and stopped in his tracks. Shui Ping bowed again and smiled at Changyu before following him out of the palace. Looking at Shui Ping's back, Xiao Hua frowned slightly. He was somewhat surprised by Shui Ping's visit, but he was even more puzzled by Xiao Jun's situation. Xiao Hua returned to the jade table and sat down. Not long after, Changyu turned around and Xiao Hua said loudly, All of you, come out and follow me to this palace. Don't cultivate in seclusion. Otherwise, wouldn't it be the same as a cave? With that said, he waved his hand and took out some spirit fruits and spirit wine, placing them on 3 jade tables. Changyu blinked and bowed. Thank you, Senior Xiao. Today, I've benefited from your presence. Hearing Xiao Hua's summons, Wu Tianxin and Zhu Chunli hurriedly came out as well. They were happy to see the spirit fruits and other things. After thanking him, they sat down and ate and drank while chatting in a reserved manner. Xiao Hua also casually said a few words before asking, Changyu, do you know of the Chanyang country in Liang province? Senior, Liang province is very far from Qing province. This Junior has never heard of it. Changyu was about to drink when he hurriedly put down the wine cup and answered respectfully. Previously, Xiaohua did not hide his conversation with Xue Ping from the three of them. Therefore, Xiaohua said again, "This Xue Ping is someone I knew in the past. I heard from him that he's currently serving as a county governor in the Chanyang country, which was founded by a Buddhist sect. I don't understand. Is a monarch of this Chanyang country really using our Taoist cultivators? Or does he really have the intention to develop his country and seek benefits for his citizens? No matter what, he's using our Taoist cultivators to work for his Buddhist sect." Wu Tianxin stood up without hesitation and said, "There aren't many good people in the Buddhist sect. On the surface, they're benevolent, abstain from meat, and pray to Buddha. They don't get close to women, but in reality, how many men can tolerate their 10 precepts? This disciple has cultivated for so many years, but I can only abstain from 9 of the 10 precepts." Xiaohua knew Wu Tianxin's personality and did not find it strange. He smiled and said, "Which precepts are so powerful? Even great cultivator Wu can't abide by them. Lust precepts. Lust is emptiness. Emptiness is lust. It's all nonsense." Wu Tianxin smiled and said, "This lust precepts are men's lust tribulation. I don't think any man can avoid it." "Old Wu, you've drunk too much." Zhu Chunli stole a glance at Xiaohua and hurriedly chided, "Don't violate your precepts in front of Senior." Wu Tianxin shuddered and shrank his neck. He hurriedly sat down and took a spirit fruit to chew. "Actually, it might not be as serious as fellow Taoist Wu said." Chang Yu smiled and said, "I've seen some Buddhist sect monks who say one thing and mean another. Similarly, I've seen even more Buddhist sect experts who are sincere towards Buddhism and treat others with sincerity. With fellow Taoist Xue Ping's cultivation, if not for the fact that the single Liang kingdom really attracted him, he might not have stayed behind, and even more so, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to come to Yaotai Mountain. It's certain that the single Liang kingdom's monarch is using Taoist cultivators, but we can't rule out the fact that this monarch is indeed ambitious." At this point, Chang Yu looked at Xiaohua again and said, "If Senior is interested, you'll know when you meet him. Otherwise, Senior can ride a Pegasus to the single Liang kingdom to take a look. If not, Junior and the others can also do it for you." "Haha, there's no need for that." Xiaohua waved his hand. "I'm just curious. If I have time, I'll go take a look myself." Zhu Qingli seemed to want to say something, but before he could speak, Xiaohua raised his head and looked outside the palace. He said, "Chang Yu, go take a look. There seems to be someone outside again." "Yes, Senior." Chang Yu was very happy. He hurriedly got up and walked quickly to the palace door. Zhu Qingli and Wu Tianxin were slightly stunned. After all, their cultivation levels were relatively low. If there was anything they should be called. Zhu Qingli even had a look of regret on his face. Not long after, Chang Yu brought a boy with red lips and white teeth in a clean Taoist robe in. He said respectfully, Senior Hong, Songzi sent an invitation card to invite you to a banquet. Junior Qing Mu greets perfected Xiao. The boy walks in front of Xiaohua and respectfully raises his hands. In his hands is a diamond-shaped crystal object. Inside it is flashing a green and red brilliance. It looks very extraordinary. The boy says, "Junior is under the order of my family's Taoist to invite Taoist to Taoist what is banquet." Xiaohua slightly nodded and reached out to take the crystal object. He slightly used his Zhen Yuan and saw the crystal overflowing with brilliance. The green and red brilliance respectively gathered in 2 parts of the crystal. Soon after, the brilliance rushed out of the crystal and swam in front of Xiaohua's eyes like a shuttle used to weave cloth. A moment later, a gorgeous invitation card appeared. The characters seemed to come alive and made a sound. It was Hong Songzi's voice. "Perfected Xiao, I originally planned to invite fellow Taoist to my Immortal's Cave for a chat a few days ago. However, in these few days, fellow Taoists from various provinces have come to Yaotai Mountain. This is really beyond my expectations. Today, I just received Perfected Hua's invitation. I thought that I might as well go together. If fellow Taoist has the time, you can ask Qing Mu to bring fellow Taoist here. I will wait in my Immortal's Cave." The voice drifted in the palace. The green and red brilliance gradually disappeared. The crystal object also turned into powder. Xiaohua looked at Qing Mu, standing respectfully. He turned his head and sent a sound transmission to Changyu. Who is this perfected Huada? Chapter 3583. Changyu's face revealed astonishment, and he hastily replied, Senior, this Huada Taoist is the state teacher of Ji Province's Lihua Nation. It said that he's already cultivated to the late stage of nascent soul, and his strength has reached the lower 5th level. This Lihua Nation was originally founded by Huada Taoist, and its national strength is very strong. It already has a history of several thousand years in Ji Province, so Huada Taoist's name is also very well known. Junior also heard that Huada Taoist has a very deep friendship with the Confucian school of Mo. In Qingmu, Xiaohua heard and said, Does Huada Taoist only invite nascent soul cultivators to his banquet? Senior, please no. Qingmu respectfully replied, Huada Taoist's invitation didn't say so, but there are at least several hundred Taoist cultivators coming to Yaotai Mountain. If not thousands, Huada Taoist can't invite them all. Only nascent soul seniors can go. However, Qingmu raised his eyes to look at Changyu's group of 3 and said with slight hesitation, Senior, if you want to bring your sect disciples, it should be possible. Oh, okay. Xiaohua nodded and waved his hand. You lead the way. Changyu, you and the others follow me to the banquet. Yes, Senior Xiao, please. Qingmu bowed and took a few steps forward to lead the way. Changyu and the others were overjoyed. They definitely didn't expect Xiaohua to bring them to the banquet. Changyu and the others understood that being able to meet a nascent soul cultivator was a fated chance. Just like the 3 of them, there was a huge difference between before and after meeting Xiaohua. A nascent soul cultivator could casually give them some pointers and some rewards, allowing them to take a few more steps on the arduous path of cultivation. Changyu looked further ahead than Wu Tianxin and Zhu Qingli, so he didn't urgently look for Xiaohua and instead waited for an opportunity. Wasn't Xiaohua's words a kind of repayment? Senior, please. Changyu didn't dare to overstep and bowed to invite Xiaohua to go first. And Xiaohua knew that at this time, he wouldn't be as casual as he was before arriving at Yaotai Mountain. He nodded slightly and walked forward. Hong Songzi's palace was quite far from Xiaohua's. Greenwood Child walked out of the palace gate and gave Xiaohua a slight smile. Clouds appeared under his feet, and he flew towards the other side of Yaotai Mountain. Xiaohua didn't use the magic cloud technique. Instead, he used a simple Taoist flying technique to follow behind Qingmu. Now, the sky was gradually darkening. Many palaces and pavilions were abnormally bright in the dark. Xiaohua glanced around and couldn't help but be shocked. It was really as Qingmu said. Many palaces were already lit up, and even more pavilions were resplendent outside the palaces. The Tao cultivators of the hidden immortal continent were far more numerous than what Xiaohua had expected. As Xiaohua flew through the air, many divine senses swept over. However, Xiaohua had just shown his outstanding strength, and his reputation wasn't that great. The strength he displayed seemed to be just so. Therefore, the divine senses swept over and then retracted. They didn't take Xiaohua seriously. Another moment later, a divine sense swept over. Once it touched Xiaohua, it immediately withdrew. Then, 3 rainbow-colored lights streaked across the sky from afar. Unexpectedly, it was Hong Songzi, Taoist Yuan Qing, and another fat nascent soul cultivator who came to welcome them. From afar, Hong Songzi smiled and said, Taoist Master Xiao, I'm really sorry to disturb your quiet cultivation. Xiaohua urged his figure and instantly passed by Qingmu. He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist, I know that fellow Taoist has been busy these past few days. That's why I didn't dare to disturb you. Now that fellow Taoist has invited me, I couldn't ask for more. Xiaohua greets fellow Taoists. Come, hi Hongzi. This is Taoist Master Xiaohua, the Black Cloud Ridge that I mentioned to you before. Hong Songzi smiled and returned the greeting. He pulled the fat cultivator beside him and said, Unexpectedly, the fat cultivator slightly frowned. He looked at Xiao Hua from head to toe. He wasn't as affectionate as Hong Songzi thought. Instead, he casually raised his hand and said, "I'm Hai Hongzi. Greetings, fellow Taoist Xiao." Taoist Yuanqing laughed and said, "Hai Hongzi, fellow Taoist Xiao is a Taoist who doesn't reveal his true strength. Don't look at him just because he only revealed the strength of a third-grade origin energy. You have to look carefully. Don't be fooled by his false appearance." That day, this old man didn't pay attention to it. If it wasn't for fellow Taoist Hong Songzi's attentiveness, we would have lost a great help in the future. Xiao Hua naturally already sensed that Hai Hongzi was checking his cultivation. However, he was used to hiding his strength. Now that he heard Taoist Yuanqing mention it, although he didn't say that he should reveal it, if he continued to hide it, it would be hypocritical. Therefore, Xiao Hua lightly patted the top of his head. He slightly released the pressure of a middle nascent soul stage cultivator. Qing Mu, Chang Yu, and the others at the side immediately felt that it was difficult to breathe. A kind of mountain-like pressure directly broke into their hearts. Fellow Taoist Xiao has actually entered the middle of the 4th grade origin energy? Hai Hongzi was shocked. He looked at Xiao Hua up and down in disbelief. He said in surprise, "Fellow Taoist with such strength, how come this old man doesn't know anything about it? This Xiao has always been in secluded meditation. I didn't want to attract the attention of a Confucian cultivator." Xiao Hua had already thought of an excuse. Moreover, previously I had a big battle with a Confucian cultivator. My cultivation has only just recovered. It would be strange if fellow Taoist Hai Hongzi knew about it. So that's how it is. I understand. Hai Hongzi laughed. He looked at Taoist Yuanqing and said, "It seems that fellow Taoist Xiao and fellow Taoist Yuanqing are both thinking about taking action. Don't mention this old man." Taoist Yuanqing hurriedly waved his hand. This old man is not interested in the Imperial Preceptor's lot. However, when he said that, Taoist Yuanqing's face became somewhat unnatural. He looked at Hong Songzi, but Hong Songzi said with a smile, "It's nothing." Since fellow Taoist Xiao came to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering, whether it's for the Imperial Preceptor's lot or for other reasons, he's still a member of our Tao sect. Moreover, when we saw fellow Taoist Xiao, we had a feeling that he was an old friend. This is also fate. Since we're going to ask for help, we naturally have to ask for a virtuous cultivator like fellow Taoist Xiao. Hearing this, how could Xiao Hua not know? He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "This Xiao doesn't dare to call himself a virtuous cultivator. However, this Xiao can tell you all that this Xiao's purpose is the Imperial Preceptor's lot. This Xiao isn't interested in any other treasures." Hai Hongzi heard this and couldn't help but laugh. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you don't have to say it so early. The Imperial Preceptor's lot isn't that rare. There's only one chance every 10 years. It's only a matter of time before nascent soul cultivators like you and me get the Imperial Preceptor's lot. However, this treasure isn't available every time." "What do you mean, fellow Taoist Hai Hongzi?" Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. However, Hong Songzi looked at the 3 golden core cultivators behind Xiao Hua and said, "We still don't know if this matter is true or not. We're just discussing it. We'll have an answer at Taoist Huada's banquet. It won't be too late for me to tell you then." "Fellow Taoist Xiao, these 3, are they your disciples?" "Oh, they're not this old man's disciples," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "We met them on the road. Since it's fate, we'll bring them along. If fellow Taoist feels it's inconvenient, this old man will let them return." "That won't be necessary. I also want to bring a few disciples. There's no harm in bringing them along." Hong Songzi waved his hand and transmitted a few words to the people below. From a palace below him, a dozen golden core cultivators flew out. When these cultivators arrived in front of Xiao Hua, they all bowed and greeted him, saying that they had seen Senior Xiao. Xiao Hua waved his hand in return. Chang Yu and the others also hurried over to greet him. The 2 groups of cultivators cooperated and flew towards the Yaotai Mountains cave under Hong Songzi's lead. Seeing that Hong Songzi had already passed the area where the palace was located and was about to enter the cave, Xiao Hua was puzzled. He thought to himself, could it be that this so-called Taoist Huoda is in the cave's quiet room? However, when he followed Hong Songzi into the cave, they kept flying inside and passed by a lot of quiet rooms. At the same time, more than a dozen nascent soul cultivators flew out of the quiet rooms and nodded slightly to Xiao Hua and the others before flying in the same direction. Xiao Hua knew that his thoughts weren't wrong. However, when he flew into the depths of the cave, he saw a huge palace door open. In front of the palace door stood a lot of boys welcoming guests. He knew that he still underestimated this Taoist Huoda. He actually had an immortal's cave in the Yaodai mountain that was different from the others. Xiao Hua and the others landed in front of the palace door. Naturally, a boy hurriedly came forward and bowed to greet them. After asking for their names, he immediately led them into the palace. The palace was huge, similar to the immortal's cave of an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. Now, thick candles were hung all over the palace, brightening the entire palace. The palace's layout could be considered exquisite. Various kinds of curtains were hung between the walls and the pillars. The fist-sized pearls on them shone brightly under the candles. However, even Xiao Hua, a cultivator who didn't pay attention to luxury, felt that although this palace was much more luxurious than the palaces outside, it still didn't match Taoist Huoda's identity as a nascent soul cultivator. There were a lot of jade tables placed in the palace. Although they seemed somewhat disorderly, they were very orderly. No matter which jade table the cultivator sat on, they would feel that they were very close to the jade table at the head. There wasn't any feeling of favoritism. At this moment, there were a lot of cultivators sitting inside the palace. Some were tall, some were short, some were fat, some were thin, some had white hair, some were drooping, and so on. When these cultivators saw Hong Songzi and the others come in, they naturally swept out their divine senses. However, when they saw their faces and cultivations, they withdrew them. Xiao Hua now looked like a middle nascent soul cultivator. He wasn't particularly conspicuous among this group of nascent soul cultivators. When Xiao Hua entered the main hall, he naturally looked towards the head of the palace. He saw that behind the jade table, there was a boy who wasn't more than 5 feet tall, sitting upright. This boy's face was slightly red, and there was a pitch-black flame pattern flickering between his eyebrows. It somewhat resonated with the flickering golden light of the Taoist robe on his body. Moreover, the golden light on the Taoist robe was like a scorching flame, forming a faint layer of distortion around the boy's body. Looking at it with the naked eye, the boy seemed to be in another void. Good. Xiao Hua secretly stuck out his tongue. This is probably Taoist Huoda. To be able to cultivate true fire to such a degree, he's really amazing. Chapter 3584. Huoda Jinren closed his eyes and sat there quietly. There wasn't much noise in the palace. There were only whispers. Most of them were transmitting their voices through telepathy. Hong Songzi followed the boy who led the way to the side of a large pillar and sat down. Xiao Hua and the others also sat down on the side under the arrangement of the boy standing by the side. Chong Yu and the others were led by the boy to another part of the palace to sit down. Xiao Hua sat down and looked around. The cultivators who had opened their eyes slightly nodded their heads. As for the cultivators who were whispering to each other, they continued to whisper about something and ignored Xiao Hua. Thus, Xiao Hua asked Hong Songzi a few questions and immediately closed his eyes. He slowly comprehended the cultivation method of scattered nascent soul in his mind. This cultivation method was not only useful for Xian Songzi, but Xiao Hua also faintly felt that he could benefit a lot from it. After half an hour, a bell rang. Not far behind Huoda Daoist, a boy with a small hammer hit a fiery red bell that was half a head taller than him. Along with the sound of the bell, the entire palace became silent. Everyone looked up at Taoist Huoda. Of course, the instant the boy's hammer landed on the big bell, Huoda Daoist opened his eyes. 2 scorching flames flashed out from Huoda Daoist's eyes, and then they turned into sparks and disappeared. Hua Taoist, one red and one black, eyes slightly turned, and he looked at all the cultivators in the hall. When his gaze landed on Xiao Hua, an indescribable scorching heat came from Xiao Hua's skin, as if Hua Taoist's eyes were releasing true fire. "Fellow Taoists, please." Taoist Hua withdrew his gaze, and his eyes returned to their original pitch-black color. He immediately raised his hand and cupped his fist. "Thank you for thinking so highly of this old man. After receiving the invitation, you all came to this old man's place for a banquet. Thank you, Taoist Hua, for giving us this banquet," the cultivators said in unison. Their voices caused the candles in the palace to rapidly flicker. Taoist Hua laughed and clapped his hands. "Every time I hear the voices of so many fellow Taoists, this old man is happy from the bottom of my heart. The rise of my Tao sect is on the shoulders of all of you fellow Taoists. The fire seed of my Tao sect is also in your hearts. Come, bring wine to all of you fellow Taoists." Following Hua Jinren's command, the jade table in front of everyone flashed with a lotus-like flame. Within the flame, a sapling raised its head. In just a moment, the sapling grew more than 2 feet above the jade table. At this moment, a strong wind blew through the entire hall. The sapling swayed in the wind. Every time it swayed, a branch would grow out from the sapling. In just a moment, the sapling had turned into several branches, and on each branch was a fist-sized bud that was about to bloom. "Fellow Taoists, this is my leaf fire fruit, a specialty of the leaf fire nation. There is also dry fire wine. Please have a taste." Following Taoist Hua's voice, the flower buds slowly opened to reveal fiery red fruits the size of dates and jade pots the size of fists. Looking at the dates in front of him, Xiao Hua was slightly absent-minded. His gaze was also somewhat wandering. Yes, the last time he participated in the Nascent Soul wine party, it was in Haoming City. That was the wine party of the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain. The 3 of them looked very ugly, and their behavior was especially protective. Thinking about how the 3 elders forced him that day in Shue's loyalty, and then thinking about how the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain and Shui were no longer in this world after more than 100 years, Xiao Hua's heart was filled with mixed feelings. Taoist Hua's voice was slightly boastful. Not only because he was able to hold such a banquet in this temporary cave, but also because there were only a handful of nascent soul cultivators below the level of Confucian on the hidden immortal continent. Not to mention, these spirit fruits and spirit wine were rare in the eyes of ordinary cultivators. How could Taoist Hua take out so much at once? Seeing the strange expressions in the eyes of the surrounding nascent soul cultivators, whether it was surprise, jealousy, or greed, Taoist Hua was very happy. However, when Hua the Taoist waved his hand in the air and flames flickered in his hand, a fiery red jade cup appeared. Inside, a cluster of crimson flames mixed with a black flame flew out. Hua the Taoist looked around and was about to speak when he happened to see Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's expression was clearly different from the others, but Hua the Taoist didn't care. There were many cultivators who were absent-minded today, so he didn't care about Xiao Hua. Fellow cultivators, Taoist Hua withdrew his gaze and looked at the jade cup in his hand. He raised his voice. "The last time I came to Yaotai Mountain was 1,000 years ago. I still remember that there was snow on that day. It was as big as a banquet. I stepped on the snow to come here. Fellow cultivators thought highly of me and waited in the snow. I was moved. When I saw Grandmaster Kong Hongwu, I bluntly told him that the Taoist cultivators and Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent had coexisted for thousands of years. Although all kinds of estrangement in the ancient times caused the current situation, this situation couldn't last long. Our common enemy was the Buddhist sect. Taoist and Confucian cultivators should be friends. Brothers. This so-called Yaotai Mountain gathering actually didn't need to exist. The drawing of the state preceptor every 10 years was simply meaningless. Grandmaster Kong's face was ashamed. Although he didn't say anything in front of everyone, he privately held my hand and said, "Fellow immortal Hua, everything is understood without words. Senior and fellow immortal are close friends. Haha. This old guy actually showed off in front of me and called himself a senior. But this old guy really has a good appearance. I can't compare with him. After that day, beyond my expectation, there were more than 400 state preceptors lots in the Yaotai Mountain gathering. Although Grandmaster Kong didn't say anything, I faintly felt it in my heart. Senior Hua Da, a Yuaning cultivator who was a little closer to Taoist Hua Da, stood up and bowed. He said, I know about the Yaotai Mountain gathering 1,000 years ago. At that time, I was still a Jindan cultivator and also came to Yaotai Mountain to join in the fun. I know that in the previous Yaotai Mountain gathering, the number of the state preceptors' lots was at most 200, but I didn't expect that it suddenly increased to 400. I was really excited at that time. To tell you the truth, I didn't intend to participate in that year, but I couldn't resist the temptation of the state preceptors' lots and rushed to Yaotai Mountain to try my luck. Unfortunately, my cultivation was too shallow and I didn't gain anything in the end. But it wasn't until now that I knew the reason was actually senior. Senior. Alas, I don't know what words to use to express my inner excitement. Come, fellow cultivators, let's all get up and toast Taoist Huada on behalf of the Taoist cultivators of the hidden immortal continent. We thank him for speaking up for us and for his efforts for our Taoist sects. That Yuaning cultivator raised his cup. The other Yuaning cultivators and the Jindan cultivators in the distance all got up and said in unison, We thank Taoist Huda. This first cup of wine was originally for all of you. But I didn't expect that my words would reveal some secrets. Taoist Huda's small face was smiling like a flower. He raised his wine cup and twirled it. Good. In that case, thank you, fellow cultivators. Please, today. Speaking up to here, Taoist Huoda's brows slightly wrinkled. His gaze paused at the place where Xiao Hua was sitting and immediately moved away. He continued, It's rare for us to gather together. We must enjoy ourselves to the fullest. After the banquet, we'll take a rest. This old man has brought a lot of good things, which will certainly satisfy all of you fellow cultivators. Fellow cultivator Xiao? Xiao Hua was originally sitting not far behind Hong Songzi and the others. He was somewhat absent-minded. Taoist Yuan Qing and the others naturally didn't notice. Seeing Taoist Huoda's obvious frown, how could they not understand? They hurriedly turned their heads and immediately saw Xiao Hua sitting upright behind the jade table and looking at the flaming wine cup. Oh! Xiao Hua was only stunned for a moment. His mind entered the dark side of the space to look at Hong Songzi. Hearing Hong Songzi's call, he immediately woke up. Looking at the surrounding cultivators standing up, he bitterly smiled and waved his hand. The wine cup fell into his hand. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred. That originally crimson jade wine cup touched Xiao Hua's palm and suddenly turned into nothingness. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand to grab the cup, but unexpectedly grabbed nothing. An unknown Yuaning cultivator next to him sneered and said loudly, Many thanks for Taoist Huda's wine. I'm also looking forward to the transaction after the banquet. To Taoist Huda. To Taoist Huda. When that cultivator took the lead, the others all raised their cups and looked at Taoist Huda. Taoist Huda smiled and opened his mouth. A wisp of fire flew out from the wine cup. The fire sparkled in the air with a crimson brilliance. There was actually a faint shadow of a firebird. It flapped its wings a few times and flew into Taoist Huoda's mouth. The red light on Taoist Huoda's face flashed. When his eyes opened and closed, a wisp of fire also appeared. Immediately after, Taoist Huoda smiled and tilted the jade cup in his hand forward. The jade cup was empty. Seeing Taoist Huoda drink it in one gulp, everyone raised their cups or drank it in front of their mouths. Only Xiao Hua stood there with a faint smile on his face and watched the others drink. Whether it was Hong Songzi or Taoist Yu Qing, there was helplessness in their eyes. They wanted to help Xiao Hua out of the embarrassment, but in front of Taoist Huda, they didn't dare to. They could only smile apologetically at Xiao Hua and raise their cups to drink. However, Hai Hongzi shook his head slightly. He had already excluded Xiao Hua from the scope of cooperation. After all, Today, Xiao Hua offended Taoist Wuda because of a small detail. From this detail, Hai Hongzi could see clearly that Taoist Wuda was not very broad-minded. He might even seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Although Xiao Hua's strength was similar to his, or even a little stronger compared with Taoist Wuda, he was not just a little bit weaker. After all, one was in the middle stage of Yuanying, and the other was in the late stage of Yuanying. In particular, Taoist Wuda had a very good relationship with the Confucian cultivator. This time, he was invited by the Confucian cultivator. Since Xiao Hua was going to participate in the Yaotai gathering, it was inevitable that he would fall into the hands of Taoist Wuda. If he was mixed with Xiao Hua, it was really unwise. Chapter 3585. Hai Hongzi drank a cup of spirit wine along with everyone else. He felt a pure fire, elemental energy of heaven and earth suddenly emerge from his stomach and rush straight to his head. Hai Hongzi was overjoyed. He didn't dare to neglect it. Without waiting to sit down cross-legged, he immediately used his cultivation method to refine the fire, elemental energy of heaven and earth. At his level of cultivation, ordinary spirit wine could only be used for entertainment. He didn't expect this leaf fire spirit wine to have such an effect. Tisk. After a while, another nascent soul cultivator sighed with emotion like Hai Hongzi. Fellow Taoist Wuda, I have long heard of the leaf fire spirit wine's effect, but I never had the chance to taste it. I didn't expect to encounter it on Yaotai Mountain. To think that fellow Taoist actually let us drink this kind of spirit wine. Alas, this kind of extravagance. I'm afraid only Huda Zhenren on the hidden immortal continent can do it. Xiao Hua still stood there quietly. He didn't feel embarrassed at all. He looked at the cultivator, who spoke with interest. This cultivator's expression indeed looked very emotional. He didn't have the kind of flattery that he imagined. Looking at the cultivators around him, he waved his hand and picked up a second cup of wine. Some raised their cups to Huda Zhenren, while others drank it in one gulp. They simply ignored Huda Zhenren, thinking back to when Chang Yu and the others were drinking and eating in his palace. Xiao Hua somewhat understood that the life of Taoist cultivators below Confucian cultivation was indeed difficult. Fellow Taoist Xian Pu's words are too exaggerated. Huda Zhenren laughed. I'm only at the upper fourth level of elemental energy. There are many Taoist seniors above me. They are much more powerful than me. Fellow Taoist Wuda's words are wrong again. I'm not talking about powerful strength. The cultivator named Xian Pu shook his head. There are Taoist seniors on the hidden immortal continent. I've heard of many of them. How many of them would stand up for our Taoist cultivators? Now, how many people are as righteous, benevolent, and righteous as fellow Taoist? Huda Zhenren smiled. He felt very happy in his heart, but he hurriedly waved his hand. Xian Pu Zhenren is the one who is wrong. I don't know what the seniors have done. How can I compare with them? Miley Fire Spirit Wine is just rich in elemental energy, but the wine's effect is not strong. How can you get drunk before drinking it? That's right, Taoist Master Xuan Pu is really drunk. On the other side of Taoist Huda, another cultivator with an ancient face said, although our Tao sect is in decline, over the years, many of our seniors have died at the hands of Confucian cultivators in order to revive our Tao sect. Fellow Taoist Huda is indeed chivalrous, but compared to these seniors, you're still lacking. When Huda Zhenren heard this, his expression changed drastically. Although this cultivator had compared him to the senior cultivators of the Tao sect, it didn't seem inappropriate. Furthermore, he was only at the upper stage of the 4th grade of Essence Force. Compared to the 5th and 6th grade of Essence Force, he was indeed much weaker. However, everyone knew that he was on good terms with the Confucian cultivator, and he had even shown off just now. Now, that cultivator actually talked about the death of a Taoist senior. Wasn't he clearly not giving him any face? Would he say that he was a lackey of the Confucian cultivators? You, who are you? Taoist would have and naturally wouldn't speak. Taoist Master Xuan Pu frowned and asked, then turned to Taoist Huda, thinking that he would recognize this person. This old man is Taoist Master Ching Su, a nameless person. The cultivator's tone was still indifferent. I'm currently residing in Yong Province's Great Song Mountain. I'm merely a carefree person with no connection to the Confucian cultivators. It's no wonder that you two fellow Taoists don't recognize me. Taoist Hua's expression froze, and the flames around his body flickered. He asked with a cold voice, Taoist Master Ching Su, what do you mean by no connection to the Confucian cultivators? Could it be that this old man is wrong in asking for the death of a Tao sect disciple? Could it be that all the Tao sect cultivators under the heavens can't associate with the Confucian cultivators? At this moment, everyone had already noticed this, and many of them put down their wine cups. Xiaohua looked at the three people in the distance and faintly smiled. He very naturally sat down. Although there were some spirit wine and spirit fruits in front of him, he didn't even look at them and only raised his head thoughtfully. Seeing someone sit down, the nearby people also sat down. The previously noisy cave suddenly became quiet. Even the children brought by Taoist Huada in the distance were stunned and somewhat at a loss. Taoist Master Ching Su looked around and very calmly raised the wine cup in his hand. He said with a smile, fellow Taoists, this old man's words actually don't mean anything. Whether it is fellow Taoist fellow Taoists, or even the Tao sect ancestors this old man spoke of, they're all Tao sect disciples. The identity of Tao sect disciples in the hidden immortal continent is very awkward. Fellow Taoists, if you want to cultivate further, you have to take charge of a country. Perhaps you didn't care about the imperial teacher's lot, but you also came here for the scattered treasures of the Yaotai Mountain. Don't forget, not to mention the imperial teacher's lot, even these treasures were all given by the Confucian cultivators. If it weren't for the Confucian cultivators' coercion, would our Tao sect cultivators be like this? Of course, fellow Taoist Hua's heart to protect our Tao sect disciples is obvious to all. This old man also admires you in my heart. This old man just means to remind fellow Taoists that those who are given alms will never be able to stand on their own feet. Those who are raised in captivity will never be able to fly high. When we are struggling at death's door, don't forget that these miserable years were exchanged by our Tao sect ancestors with their lives, blood, and forceful means. The entire cave was silent. No one knew how to respond. Come, fellow Taoists, today we borrow fellow Taoist Huada's wine to worship the ancestors of Tao sect. Worship the ancestors who are not afraid of oppression for the rise of our Tao sect. Taoist Master Ching Su raised his hand and drank the spirit wine. Then he threw the wine cup on the ground and laughed. Alas, it's a joke that there are thousands of people in this cave. The Tao sect has no lofty aspirations, no hot blood in their hearts. What about the nascent soul in their chests? This old man disdains to be associated with them. With that, Taoist Master Ching Su turned into a green rainbow and rushed out of the cave. Taoist Huada's face changed greatly. Taoist Xuanpu's face changed greatly. Even Xiao Hua and the others' faces changed greatly. Everyone knew that this was Yaotai Mountain, the location of a Yaotai meeting. Although there were Tao sect disciples in this cave, who knew if there were any Confucian spies. Even Xiao Hua, who could erect a blood steel in the Bronze Pillar country, would have to think twice before personally declaring that he wanted to open the Fortune Gate and establish the Tao Gate. Stop! Taoist Xuanpu was shocked. He waved his hand and was about to scold Taoist Master Ching Su. However, Taoist Huada raised his head and a faint ring of fire rushed into the air and blocked Taoist Xuanpu's spell. He shook his head slightly and said, "Let him go. Everyone has their own aspirations. There's no need to force them. This old man has a clear conscience and can face the Tao sect ancestors directly. I don't care what others say." But Taoist Xuanpu slightly bit his lips. He still wanted to say something, but swallowed it back down. He slowly sat down and waved his hand. A fiery date fell into his hand and took a bite. He closed his eyes and tasted it. Fellow Taoists, Taoist Huada looked around and said with a smile, "There's no need to pay attention to him. This old man has encountered countless misunderstandings in the past thousands of years. Today's misunderstandings don't make a difference. Don't let this unpleasant matter disturb everyone's mood. That's right. Senior Hua said, there's no need to pay attention to others. This fellow Taoist is probably jealous of Senior's friends all over the world. A golden core cultivator in the distance actually stood up and shouted, Many thanks, many thanks. Taoist Hua actually expressed his thanks and nodded slightly to that golden core cultivator. Immediately, some tactful cultivators stood up and toasted him. There were also some cultivators who whispered. Before long, the unpleasant matter at the beginning of the banquet was almost forgotten. Fellow Taoist Xiao was a bit reckless earlier. Seeing that Taoist Hua didn't notice the commotion in the cave, Hong Songzi whispered to Xiao Hua, even if fellow Taoist doesn't like Taoist Hua, you still have to give him face. Fortunately, there was Taoist Qing Su's disturbance. Otherwise, Taoist would really remember fellow Taoist. How about this? When we're free later, we'll go toast Taoist Hua as an apology. Xiao Hua smiled and nodded slightly. Today, he was the one who was rude first. Toasting with him was nothing. Unfortunately, Hong Songzi and Xiao Hua still didn't expect that before they started to move, Taoist Huada's side moved again. They heard a slightly fat cultivator say, Fellow Taoist Huada, you haven't come here for 1,000 years. This old man also hasn't seen fellow Taoist for several hundred years. We've endured humiliation for so many years, and the younger generation of Hidden Immortal Continent has also risen. To be honest, not to mention the Golden Core disciples who came to this banquet today, I'm also not familiar with many of these nascent soul cultivators. Why don't we let them report their names one by one? First, everyone knows each other. Second, it'll be easier to take care of each other in the future. Good. Taoist Wood nodded and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Jin Su is right. Although this old man has sent an invitation, as long as you're a nascent soul cultivator of my Tao sect, you can come to the banquet. Since everyone is a Tao sect disciple, it's reasonable to know each other. With that, Taoist Hua raised his head with a smile, but the direction he was looking at was not Xiao Hua. Junior Zhang Cheng, from the Chuyin Pavilion in Yin Province. I just had a baby 200 years ago. Now my Taoist name is Zhi Qingzi. Following Taoist Hua Da's gaze, a very handsome cultivator stood up, holding a glass of wine in his hand, and said respectfully, That year, Junior also met Senior Hua on Yaotai Mountain. I was also deeply impressed by Senior's demeanor. Now that Junior has also cultivated to the nascent soul stage, I dare not say what I can do for my Tao sect. I only hope that Junior can be lucky enough to win the lot of the state preceptor and open a paradise for my Tao sect disciples. Junior salutes Senior Hua. With that, Zhi Chengzi raised his glass and drank it. Good. The old man is very happy that the little boy has become a great talent. Taoist Hua was overjoyed. He raised his glass and drank it, and said, This old man also wishes you success and become a pillar of my Tao sect. Chapter 3586. Soon after, a few nascent soul cultivators stood up and respectfully reported their names. They complimented Taoist Hua and offered him a cup of spirit wine. Taoist Hua seemed to be very happy and didn't refuse anyone. He downed all the cups in one go. After a few cups, Fire Virtue Taoist's face was slightly red, as if he couldn't handle the alcohol. When Fire Virtue Taoist's gaze fell on Xiao Hua, his eyes showed a trace of a smile. He unexpectedly raised his hand and asked, Fellow Taoist, you really look unfamiliar. May I know which cave you're cultivating in? I am Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua stood up and said, I'm currently cultivating in Yu Province's Black Wind Ridge. Yu Province? Fire Virtue Taoist slightly tilted his head and frowned. I don't have many opportunities to go to Yu Province. I remember that 600 years ago, I was invited by fellow Taoist Shenhong to his Fish Sword Cave. At that time, fellow Taoist Shenhong also invited fellow Taoists to Yu Province to welcome me. I don't seem to have seen fellow Taoists before. Indeed. Xiao Hua nodded. I've also never seen fellow Taoist Hua. After saying that, Xiao Hua was about to sit down. The fat nascent soul cultivator frowned and said unhappily, Xiaohua, fellow Taoist Huada is guiding the younger generation. Although you're not familiar with fellow Taoist Huada, now that you've met him, it's inevitable that you won't have time to rely on fellow Taoist Huada in the future. Since you're here, there's no reason not to toast fellow Taoist Huada, right? Others have already toasted, but you didn't. Not to mention that your etiquette is not complete. How will others see you? Xiaohua smiled and pointed at the table in front of him. He asked, then fellow Taoist, please help me see which cup of wine I should toast. Naturally, it's the wine of apology. The cultivator next to him was unhappy, as if he was covering for Xiaohua. He said, others all have 1 cup, you can toast 3 cups. It's also an apology for your rudeness. Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao. Hong Songzi, who was at the side, hurriedly took his wine cup and jade pot, and said with a smile, you're not familiar with the other fellow Taoists, so how about this humble Taoist toast with you? Xiaohua was also unable to discern the true intentions of that slightly plump cultivator. However, since Hong Songzi had stood up, it wouldn't be good for him to embarrass him. He nodded and said, since that's the case, I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist. With that, Xiaohua was about to leave, but at this moment, Taoist Huada let out a cold snort. The entire cave became a lot colder. He slowly said, this old man naturally dares to drink other people's wine. However, this old man doesn't dare to drink fellow immortal Zhao's wine. Fellow immortal? Taoist Huada's words shocked all the cultivators attending the banquet. After all, Taoist cultivators usually addressed each other as fellow Taoist. Fellow immortal was usually addressed by Confucian cultivators, Taoist cultivators, or Buddhist cultivators. Could it be that this Xiaohua isn't a Tao cultivator? In an instant, everyone's eyes were filled with resentment. All of their divine senses swept toward Xiaohua, as if they wanted to see through Xiaohua's true colors. Xiaohua was stunned. He raised his head and stared at Taoist Huada for a moment. He frowned and said, Taoist Huada, what do you mean by this? Nothing. Taoist Huada raised his hand and poured another mouthful of dark red wine into his mouth. His slightly red face became even redder. Taoist Huada opened his mouth and blew out a small flame. He let out a long breath and said, although this old man rarely goes to Yu Province, I'm quite familiar with Yuzhou's nascent soul cultivators and late gold core cultivators. After fellow Taoist Zhen Hong died, he sent this old man a secret talisman and mentioned the methods of Confucian cultivators. He suspected that the Immortal Palace was training Taoist cultivators somewhere in Yu Province. This plan has been carried out for tens of thousands of years, but for various reasons, it hasn't been successful. After this old man received the secret talisman, I investigated it but couldn't find anything. However, after seeing fellow Immortal Xiao today, this old man suddenly became vigilant. He's a Confucian cultivator's spy? Several people near Xiaohua were shocked. Even Hong Songzi and Taoist Yuanqing's expression changed. Several people hurriedly retreated, as if they were afraid of coming into contact with Xiaohua. Xiaohua sneered. The hidden immortal continent is vast. Yu Province is one of the 9 provinces. There are many cultivators in Yu Province. Do you know them all? Have you seen Taoist Master Qing, Su from before? At this point, how could Xiaohua not know what Taoist Huada was thinking? Taoist Huada didn't care about his earliest rudeness. After all, this was Taoist Huada's banquet. No matter what, he had to have a bearing. Taoist Master Qing, Su didn't care about Taoist Huada's face and revealed some secrets. Moreover, these secrets seemed to be true. It was inconvenient for Taoist Huada to make a move. He didn't even have the ability to stop Taoist Master Qing, Su, from leaving. Taoist Huada's face and prestige had been damaged a lot. Although no one would talk loudly at this banquet, there would be sound transmissions. Afterwards, discussions and rumors would appear. This had an extremely bad influence on Taoist Huada. If Taoist Huada wanted to save this face, he had to do it before the banquet. Xiaohua, this originally indifferent and impolite cultivator, became the target of Taoist Hua De to kill the chicken to scare the monkey. As for Taoist Hua De's blushing face, perhaps it was a kind of backup plan. If Xiao Hua had some background, he could use drunkenness as a cover. Others might some understand, but Taoist Hua De's words were very reasonable. Looking at the cultivators in the Immortal's cave, which one of them didn't call their friends? Which one of them didn't greet the cultivators in the Immortal's cave? Which one of them sat down and stared blankly like Xiao Hua? Even Hong Songzi was very hesitant at this time. He was also suspicious. Xiao Hua was a gentleman. Naturally, he wouldn't point out Taoist Hua De's filthy heart in front of everyone. He could only beat around the bush and point out Taoist Master Ching Su, telling Taoist Hua De not to bully people too much. Unfortunately, Taoist Hua De sneered. A little junior dares to climb up to a late Yuanying stage senior? That Taoist Master Ching Su is one step away from the 5th level of Yuanqi. How could he be a Confucian cultivator spy? You have no background. It's like you jumped out of a stone. If I don't suspect you, how can I suspect Taoist Master Ching Su? Taoist Yufeng, you're the state preceptor of Liao State in Yu Province. You should be familiar with all the Taoist cultivators in Yu Province. Have you seen this Xiao Hua, or have you heard of him? Following Taoist Hua De's greeting, a thin, early Yuanying stage cultivator hastily stood up. He looked Xiao Hua up and down, then shook his head and said, "The Taoist cultivators in my Yu province can't compare to other provinces. We've always been very few. When Senior Jinhong was alive, there were only 37 Yuanying cultivators. After Senior Jinhong fell, there were only 36. I was the youngest. I have never heard of him. Moreover, in the past 300 years, there hasn't been a Taoist cultivator's celestial phenomenon of pregnancy. This Xiao Hua, I have indeed never seen him before. What else do you have to say?" Taoist Hua De said with a smile. "Although I'm very familiar with the Confucian cultivator Kong Han Wu, it's also an improper scheme. I've endured humiliation for the sake of my Confucian cultivator. How can I be like you? Although I'm a Taoist cultivator, my heart is that of a Confucian cultivator." Xiao Huan narrowed his eyes. He looked at Taoist Hua De and then at the so-called Taoist Yufeng. He said faintly, "Taoist Hua De, others might be interested in what you're thinking, but I don't want to know. I'm thinking you don't know, and you can't possibly know. With your background, I'm afraid everyone knows what I'm thinking. If I were a Confucian cultivator, you would have already made your move, right? Why say so much? Oh, I'm wrong. If I were a Confucian cultivator, you would have already licked my toes." Bastard, Taoist Hua De was furious. The flames around his body flourished, and a late nascent soul cultivator's pressure soared into the sky. In particular, a nascent soul hand that was several zhang in size slapped out from the top of Taoist Hua De's head. The nascent soul hand was as solid as jade, and within it there were faint traces of fire. As soon as it appeared, it carried a pressure that enveloped Xiao Hua for several zhang. Not to mention Xiao Hua, even the hesitant Hong Songzi, Taoist Yuan Qing, and the other nascent soul cultivators were all trembling. Several early nascent soul cultivators' legs were trembling, and they hurriedly released their pressure to resist with all their might. Xiao Hua's eyes also flashed with flames. The instant the flames around Taoist Hua De's body flickered, Xiao Hua's heart was slightly moved. He was currently cultivating the 5 Qis unifications, and the crimson heart of heaven corresponded to the fire Qi. A cultivator's heart contained fire. Xiao Hua also experienced the test of the fire Qi in the 5 brocade cloud painting. If Xiao Hua stimulated the fire Qi at this moment, and then attacked with external fire, Xiao Hua could imagine Taoist Hua De's sorry state. Xiao Hua even believed that his pincer attack would cause Taoist Hua De to burn himself. However, this thought only lasted for a moment. Xiao Hua's use of a Confucian cultivator's technique would make him lose his tongue. Moreover, Taoist Hua De was a Taoist nascent soul cultivator. If he killed Taoist Hua De in front of everyone, it would be breaking off relations with the Taoist sect. How could Xiao Hua do that? Thus, Xiao Hua smiled coldly and slapped his hand on top of his head. Boom! Like a surging tide, a pressure comparable to a late nascent soul cultivator was born. At the same time, a golden hand similar in size to Taoist Hua's nascent soul cultivator's hand appeared out of thin air. It really grabbed the incoming fiery nascent soul cultivator's hand. Ah! All the cultivators were stunned. In a moment of astonishment, everyone immediately released their pressure and formed hand seals to prepare to protect themselves. However, they were still too slow. Boom! With a loud sound, the pressure of the two cultivators collided first. A huge whirlwind was born from the void. All of a sudden, the table and other things between Xiao Hua and Taoist Hua were swept up. A few cultivators who were caught off guard were also swept up. Not only once. Rumble! Like a thunderclap, the two big hands above the whirlwind clashed together. The fiery hand that made the cultivators feel unparalleled in the world first shone brilliantly, then trembled rapidly. In just a few breaths, it was immediately crushed. It turned into hundreds of firebirds scattered in the air. How is this possible? A group of early nascent soul and mid-nascent soul cultivators in the distance turned pale with fright. The sign of a nascent soul cultivator's defeat is collapse. How could it be crushed? Unless the opponent's strength is far beyond. Could it be? Could it be? Chapter 3587. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the majestic Xiao Hua, who was floating in the air. Fire Virtue Taoist was even more shocked. When the pressure collided, he sucked in a breath of cold air. His nascent soul trembled slightly. When a powerful magic power surged over, without waiting for him to activate his magic power, that magic power had already crushed his nascent soul's hand. Under the backlash of the magic power, a mouthful of essence blood flowed up. I am Taoist Master Xiao. How can you tame my foundation? Erecting a blood steel in Seven Suns Temple, killing State Preceptor in Black Wind Ridge, killing Prime Minister's father in front of Jade Mountain. If you weren't a friend of Taoist, would you have already offered your head as a sacrifice? Xiao Hua arrogantly flew into the air. His gaze was like a knife, sweeping past Fire Virtue Taoist. Then, without turning into a rainbow, he slowly flew out. Xiao Hua flew extremely slowly, but his aura was like a rainbow. Not to mention the nascent soul cultivators were dumbfounded, not daring to speak. Even Fire Virtue Taoist's gaze flickered. Although his natal magic treasure and nascent soul were already prepared, he still didn't dare to move. That move of Xiao Hua's earlier had truly intimidated him. If it wasn't for the fact that Xiao Hua was at the upper stage of the 4th grade of Essence Energy and had the strength of the lower stage of the 5th grade of Essence Energy, how could he possibly injure him in one move? He couldn't be sure if Xiao Hua would still be able to keep his life after he used his magic treasure. Taoist Master Xiao Hua. I know, it's Xiao Hua. Bronze Pillar states Xiao Hua. Taoist Master Yufeng, who had long been hiding in the distance, suddenly seemed to wake up. He cried out ecstatically, "The world Taoist sects have long declined. Today, the hidden immortal Taoist gate opens. With me, Xiao Hua, in the world, you dare to let your disciples be bullied?" Such arrogant words are actually true. Could it be? Bronze Pillar states State Preceptor and Prime Minister's father were killed by you? Unfortunately, why would Xiao Hua care about them? His figure flew out of the cave and disappeared. Xiao! Fellow Taoist Xiao. Hong Songzi called out, but he hesitated again. If he were to chase after Xiao Hua now, he would be going against Taoist Hua. He knew Taoist Hua inside out, but he wasn't particularly familiar with Xiao Hua. Hong Songzi was helpless. He looked at Taoist Yuan Qing. The two of them exchanged glances, then sat back down. They had brought Xiao Hua here, so Taoist Hua would definitely ask about it. They could only wait and see. Taoist Master Yufeng, what's going on with this Xiao Hua? Hong Songzi and the others were afraid of Hua de Jinren. Naturally, they were not afraid of Hua de Jinren. Taoist Master Yufeng was somewhat proud and somewhat regretful. He glanced at Taoist Master Huoda, then at the several cultivators who were questioning him. Not daring to offend anyone, he could only smile apologetically and say, "Fellow Taoists, it's actually just some rumors. I can't be sure, so I didn't think of it earlier. The world's Taoist sects have long declined. Today, the hidden immortal Taoist gate opens. With me, Xiaohua. In this world, you dare to let your disciples be bullied?" A cultivator with a grave and stern expression said coldly, "Your tone is too big. Even a 7th-level essence energy cultivator wouldn't dare to say such a thing. This guy actually dares to talk nonsense?" Speaking up to hear, that cultivator's face suddenly revealed a strange expression. He shouted loudly, "However, I like it. Damn it. How come I didn't think of such a good word? Come, old brother Yifeng, let's drink a big cup of wine. Taoist Master Chu is in a good mood. This old man will accompany you in a cup. This Xiaohua is called Taoist Master Xiao. His arrogance is actually on par with yours." That cultivator called Taoist Master Yifeng scooped up his cup and raised his foot to drink with Taoist Master Chu. Unexpectedly, he didn't put Taoist Master Huoda in his eyes. Then he looked at Taoist Master Yifeng. "Yifeng, quickly tell us everything you know. Damn it, it's been a long time since I was this happy. Yes, 2 seniors." Taoist Master Yifeng smiled bitterly. In his heart, he somewhat regretted speaking too much just now. At this moment, how could Xiaohua be as arrogant as Taoist Master Chu thought? In his heart, he really was somewhat angry. Ignorant man, Xiaohua was still flying in the air, still cursing himself. "You really ruined my important matter." This Xiao still wanted to hide a bit of my cultivation, so as not to let those Confucian cultivators notice. Although the matter of the Copper Pillar State was not small, it was still a matter of the country. Lung Qingge and the others were only at the lower 4th level of essence energy. Even if some high-level Confucian cultivators knew, they wouldn't pay too much attention. I only needed to pass this Jade Pavilion gathering, then accumulate strength. After 10 years, 100 years later, those high-level Confucian cultivators wouldn't notice me again. I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to do anything to me. But now this damned Taoist master, Huoda, completely messed up. In the future, this Xiao will be hunted down by Confucian cultivators. Xiaohua was somewhat upset. Yes, Xiaohua had been carefully hiding his cultivation since he started refining qi, fearing that something would go wrong. This kind of careful action was related to his temperament of not liking to show off, but also related to his situation being different from other cultivators. After so many years, he had almost gotten used to it. Although he set up a blood steal in the Copper Pillar State, he still planned to quietly develop his power like before, without attracting the attention of others. By the time others noticed, he would have fully grown his wings, and others would no longer be able to make things difficult for him. Unfortunately, the development of the matter had already exceeded his expectations. As early as when he killed Lung Qingge and obtained the 5 Qis unifications, he had already buried a hidden danger. Now, Taoist Master Huoda had only uncovered this hidden danger ahead of time. Forget it. Let's take one step at a time. After I take the Imperial Teacher's sign and return to the Black Cloud Ridge, I'll discuss it with Li Xiang. Xiaohua was somewhat at his wit's end. He could only give up for now. At this time, Xiaohua had already flown out of the Immortal's Cave. Turning his head, he didn't see a single cultivator chasing after him, not even a strand of divine sense. Xiaohua sneered, urging his figure to fly out of the cave. After flying for a while, Xiaohua saw many cultivators coming towards him. Some entered secluded rooms, but even more people flew towards a fork in the road. Xiaohua had always kept a respectful distance from the fork in the road. When he flew in earlier, he didn't look at it. Seeing that it was very lively and his divine sense couldn't penetrate it, Xiaohua stood still and beckoned to a gold-core old man. "Come here." That gold-core old man was stunned. Although he couldn't see Xiaohua's cultivation, he could hear that Xiaohua's tone was somewhat unfriendly. He hurriedly flew over and bowed, Junior, Jin Hong greets Senior. Does Senior have any instructions? What's in front? Why is it so lively? Xiao Hua pointed at the place Jin Hong wanted to go and asked. Hearing this, Jin Hong hurriedly smiled and said, reporting to Senior, in front is the trade fair. Today is the last day. If we want to use it when we enter the Jade Mountain 3 days later, we must find it today. Therefore, most of the fellow Taoists have come today. Oh, I know. You can go. Xiao Hua nodded and waved his hand, indicating that cultivator to leave. The gold core cultivator bowed and left. Xiao Hua looked at the cave in the distance and urged his figure to leave. After all, he didn't lack anything now. Those who came to the Jade Mountain were all gold core and nascent soul cultivators. With their insight, they wouldn't take out something too good for Xiao Hua to take advantage of. Xiao Hua was too lazy to go over. However, when Xiao Hua just flew a few meters, a familiar voice suddenly sounded, Taoist Xiao, aren't you going to the trade fair to take a look? Sir. Xiao Hua frowned. Standing in the air, he turned his head to look. It was Taoist Qing Su who left Taoist Hua Da's banquet before him. After seeing clearly, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, So it was Taoist Qing Su. I thought Taoist had already left. I didn't expect you to still be here. Taoist Qing Su flew to Xiao Hua's side and said with a smile, It's just Taoist Hua. I don't fear him. However, it's good that I didn't leave. Otherwise, how could I see Taoist Xiao defeating Taoist Hua with one palm? Taoist Xiao really hid his strength well. I wouldn't dare. Xiao Hua smiled. Taoist Hua was angry out of humiliation and wanted to vent his anger on others. I only took the blame for someone else. Ha ha, it's all I's fault. I actually let Taoist Xiao take the blame. Taoist Qing Su laughed heartily. He raised his hand and said, Taoist Xiao, please. We'll go to the trade fair. You pick something and I'll apologize to you. No need. Xiao Hua waved his hand. I also feel uncomfortable looking at Taoist Hua. You taught him a good lesson. I just casually taught him a lesson. Taoist Xiao, do you feel that I's heart isn't sincere enough? Or do you feel that there isn't anything you like in this trade fair? Taoist Qing Su said with a smile. How about I take out my Chinquan bag? All right. Xiao Hua's heart moved. He thought of something and said with a nod, Since you're so sincere, I'll accompany you. Please. Taoist Qing Su smiled and raised his hand. Xiao Hua followed Taoist Qing Su into the immortal cave. While flying, Taoist Qing Su also withdrew his pressure. The others also looked similar to Xiao Hua. After flying into the immortal cave, Xiao Hua glanced around. The entire immortal cave was a bit smaller than Taoist Hua's. However, the advantage was that the two immortal caves were connected together. It was quite spacious. At this moment, there were already quite a few people in the immortal cave. However, these people were still rather sparse. After all, this wasn't a large-scale trade fair. Taoist Xiao, where should we start? Taoist Qing Su asked softly as he saw Xiao Hua land. Xiao Hua casually pointed and said, Let's start from here. Here. Taoist Qing Su was slightly stunned. These are items used by Jindan cultivators, right? Yes, what's wrong? Nothing, please. Taoist Qing Su smiled without saying anything and followed behind Xiao Hua. It was just like the trade fair at midnight in Century City. In just a moment, Taoist Qing Su didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Hua was like an old lady buying vegetables in the market. He was interested in everything he saw and would ask about it, but he just didn't buy it. How could he be a 4th-level elemental energy grandmaster? However, Taoist Qing Su couldn't tell whether Xiao Hua was doing it intentionally or not. He could only restrain his temper and accompany him. Unfortunately, after another incense stick of time, Xiao Hua still didn't sell anything. He was really shopping. Chapter 3588. After watching from the side for a long time, Master Qing Su finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Master Xiao, if you're interested, just release your divine sense. Not to mention one stall, even 10 stalls can be seen at once. Why do you have to ask them one by one? If you're not a fish, how can you know the joy of a fish? Xiao Hua disdained. Indeed, he couldn't happily stroll around the trade fair with Master Ching Su. All right. Master Ching Su nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Xiao Hua glanced at Master Ching Su. He also couldn't figure out what this cultivator meant. When Xiao Hua glanced sideways at Taoist Master Ching Su, he saw some jade bottles on the table in front of a golden core cultivator. Below the jade bottles, there were a few joints. These bones couldn't be easily seen by divine sense. This was also the reason why Xiao Hua carefully checked each stall. Fellow Taoist, please. Xiao Hua walked to the cultivator's table and cupped his hands. That golden core cultivator glanced at Xiao Hua and Master Ching Su behind him. He couldn't see through Xiao Hua's cultivation. Xiao Hua's temperament was gentle like jade, making the cultivator feel that his cultivation was similar to his own. However, Master Ching Su beside Xiao Hua was different. Although he couldn't see through his cultivation, Master Ching Su's eyes were like lightning and his aura was like a king. The golden core cultivator immediately felt that Master Ching Su was hiding something. If Master Ching Su was like this, how could Xiao Hua in front of him be inferior? That golden core cultivator didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly stood up and bowed. I don't dare. May I know which item Senior likes? Xiao Hua originally wanted to loosen the reins, only to grasp them better. Now, this jade bottle didn't need to be looked at. It must be some medicine for injuries. This kind of thing was meaningless to nascent soul cultivators. If Xiao Hua asked again, it would only make it more conspicuous. Forget it. Xiao Hua reached out and pulled the jade bottle away. He picked up the bones below and asked, Where did you get this thing? How do you want to exchange it? This thing? The golden core cultivator was stunned, and so was Taoist Master Ching Su. After all, on the golden core cultivator's table, apart from some jade bottles, there were also a few pieces of refining materials. Taoist Master Ching Su did not think that these bones were of any use. The golden core cultivator's face was slightly red as he hurriedly said, Senior, I picked these up from the reef when I was traveling in the South Sea. When I took out the jade bottle from my small Chinquan bag, I poured them all out and didn't have time to clean them up. If Senior wants it, feel free to take it. All right, Xiao Hua didn't hold back. With a flip of his hand, his knuckles disappeared. Then, he raised his hand again and took out a jade bottle. He said, This is the mysterious Een pill. It's the best for consolidating one's spiritual sense. It's suitable for golden core cultivators. Many thanks, Senior. The golden core cultivator was overjoyed. He reached out to receive the jade bottle and stammered his thanks. Xiao Hua smiled and said, If you can tell this old man the location of the reef, that would be even better. Of course. The golden core cultivator hurriedly put away the jade bottle. After thinking for a while, he took out a jade pen and wrote something on it. Then, he respectfully handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua took it and nodded. He put it away and walked to another place. Spiritual Master Ching Su followed for a while. He couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Spiritual Master Xiao, what's the use of these bones? Nothing, Xiao Hua said indifferently. This Xiao likes strange things. Who knows if there's some big secret hidden inside? Spiritual Master Ching Su naturally knew that Xiao Hua wasn't telling the truth. He smacked his lips and was about to ask more when he saw Xiao Hua quicken his pace and rush to another jade table. Xiao Hua's gaze once again fell on a very inconspicuous material. After another half an incense stick's worth of time, Xiao Hua had visited many stalls and bought many things. Taoist Master Ching Su, who was at the side, saw clearly that Xiao Hua was buying things that others didn't want. Even with his own eyes, he couldn't see the purpose of these things. Damn it, this Xiao Hua is really strange. Spiritual Master Ching Su muttered. What does he mean? Could it be that these things are all treasures? But why can't this old man see them? Just as Taoist Master Ching Su was thinking, the cave entrance became noisy again. Xiao Hua and Taoist Master Ching Su turned to look and saw that there were actually quite a few nascent soul cultivators at the entrance of the cave. Their faces were filled with excitement as they walked towards the other side of the cave while whispering in low voices. Oh, aren't these cultivators attending the banquet in Spiritual Master Huada's cave? Spiritual Master Ching, Su asked curiously. Didn't that guy say that he would hold a trade fair after the banquet? Xiao Hua sneered. He wanted to, but I'm afraid he wouldn't have the face to do it again. It's true. Spiritual Master Ching, Su laughed. He looked around and suddenly transmitted his voice. Spiritual Master Xiao, I've been following you for a long time. To be honest, I want to talk to you about something. Oh, so you want to talk about something? Xiao Hua smiled and transmitted his voice. This Xiao thought you were going to pay for this, Xiao. Paying the bill is not a problem. As long as fellow Taoist Xiao likes it, this one will definitely buy it. Spiritual Master Ching, Su smiled. What I said earlier also counts. I don't need you to pay for this, Xiao. Xiao Hua stopped and looked at Spiritual Master Ching Su. You only need to answer one, or two questions. If it involves secrets, can I choose not to answer? Of course. Xiao Hua nodded. But rest assured, fellow Taoist, I won't make things difficult for you. That's good. Fellow Taoist, please speak. Do you know about heavenly soul, earthly soul, and mortal essence? Heavenly soul, earthly soul, and mortal essence. Spiritual Master Ching, Su was obviously stunned. He shook his head naturally. I have never heard of it. Oh, then forget it. Xiao Hua waved his hand. This thing was one of the things that Xian Song Zi used to cultivate his scattered soul. Since Spiritual Master Ching, Su didn't know about it. He probably didn't know about the other rare things either. What about the other question? Spiritual Master Ching, Su was somewhat unwilling and transmitted his voice again. Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and smiled. The second question is, where are the heavenly soul, earthly soul, and mortal essence? Spiritual Master Ching, Su slapped his forehead and laughed. This old man shouldn't have asked. However, what's the use of this thing? Where did fellow Taoist Xiao learn about it? If this old man knew, perhaps I could help you. Xiao Hua raised his foot and walked forward again. He said, if fellow Taoist doesn't know, then forget it. There's no need for fellow Taoist to worry about what this thing is for. Fellow Taoist, perhaps you don't know. Even if I don't, I can help you ask. Even if fellow Taoist wants to know something else, I can still help you. Spiritual Master Ching, Su hurriedly transmitted his voice again. Xiao Hua didn't understand. He smiled and said, what do you mean, fellow Taoist? Spiritual Master Ching, Su also smiled and said, could it be that fellow Taoist Xiao has already forgotten what I said at Spiritual Master Huada's banquet? What did fellow Taoists say at the banquet? Xiao Hua looked at Spiritual Master Ching Su thoughtfully, as if he was recalling what Spiritual Master Ching Su said just now. Seeing that Xiao Hua was pretending to be deaf and mute, Spiritual Master Ching Su smiled and said, Spiritual Master Xiao, a straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Let this old man ask you, fellow Taoist, have you met any Taoist seniors above the 5th stage of origin power? Or perhaps, fellow Taoist's master. Fellow Taoist, there's no need to worry about my master. Xiao Hua's tone was somewhat cold. Spiritual Master Xiao, please don't misunderstand. Spiritual Master Ching, Su hurriedly explained, I have never doubted fellow Taoist's identity as a Taoist cultivator. Moreover, I also believe that fellow Taoist doesn't have any relationship with Confucian cultivators. What I mean is fellow Taoist tone is rather arrogant. You actually dare to say establish a Taoist sect. However, fellow Taoist, don't you feel that your strength is simply insufficient to establish a Taoist sect? Look at the cultivators in this cave. Perhaps each of them isn't fellow Taoist match, but if they join forces, they're enough to kill fellow Taoist, right? Since that's the case, why don't they dare to establish a Taoist sect? Why do they still want to come to Yaotai Mountain? Xiao Hua slightly narrowed his eyes. He seemed to understand what Spiritual Master Ching Su wanted to say. Fellow Taoist spirit in establishing our Taoist sect is commendable. Moreover, fellow Taoist cultivation is also truly outstanding. Someone as handsome as fellow Taoist is the hope of our Taoist sect in hidden immortal continent. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't stop him, Spiritual Master Ching Su transmitted his voice. However, fellow Taoists must understand that reviving the Taoist sect isn't the work of a single person. Thousands upon thousands of Taoist sect disciples sacrificed their lives for the Taoist sect's existence in hidden immortal continent today. It's also because of the Taoist sect's senior sacrifice over the past tens of thousands of years that you and I are talking in this cave right now. We Taoist sect cultivators should work together and unite with each other. Only then will we be able to stand out. Unfortunately, the Taoist sect seniors have all withered away. There aren't many who can protect us anymore. It's time for us to walk in front of others. However, when walking in front of others, we need to have a strategy. We also need to protect ourselves first. For someone like fellow Taoist who speaks arrogant words as soon as he appears, I'm afraid he won't live for long. In I's opinion, it's better for fellow Taoists to find a Taoist sect senior who can protect you as soon as possible. Seeing that spiritual master Qing Su first talked about establishing the Taoist sect and said that cultivators should unite, Xiao Hua agreed from the bottom of his heart. However, when spiritual master Qing Su changed the topic and talked about the protection of the Taoist sect seniors, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel disgusted. Ever since Xiao Hua started cultivating, he didn't dare to say that he didn't receive any protection. However, how many of the seniors who cared about him sincerely protected him? Many of them had ulterior motives, such as helplessness and affection, and very few of them. Fellow Taoist means, without the seniors' protection, we're helpless? Can we possibly be killed by Confucian cultivators? Xiao Hua asked indifferently. Spiritual Master Qing Su's growth was different from Xiao Hua's, so he naturally didn't understand what Xiao Hua was thinking. However, he also heard the other meaning in Xiao Hua's tone. Knowing that Xiao Hua had misunderstood, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, "That's not the case. If we were all under seniors' protection, we wouldn't have been able to cultivate to the 4th grade of origin energy." Spiritual Master Qing Su, if you have something to say, just say it. We've all lived for thousands of years. What haven't we seen? Why beat around the bush? Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient. Chapter 3589. Taoist Master Qing Su sighed and looked around again. He had some misgivings and transmitted his voice in a low voice. All right, I actually came to look for other Taoists. I didn't expect to meet Taoist Xiao. Moreover, I'm not familiar with Taoist Xiao, so I was overly cautious. Please forgive me. And Xiao Hua nodded. No matter what, I'm a Taoist cultivator. If you have something to say, you can say it directly. Does Taoist Xiao know about Grand Mist Ancestor? Taoist Master Qing Su asked in a low voice with a respectful expression. Xiao Hua was at a loss and shook his head slightly. I've never heard of him. Taoist Master Qing Su was startled. He looked at Xiao Hua from head to toe as if he didn't believe what Xiao Hua said. Xiao Hua's heart thumped. He knew that the person Taoist Master Qing Su was talking about must be an extremely famous Taoist senior on the hidden immortal continent. However, he didn't explain and just looked straight at Taoist Master Qing Su. Taoist Master Qing Su laughed when he saw Xiao Hua looking at him. He said in a low voice, Taoist Xiao really knows how to joke. Since you've heard this name, you must already know why I'm here. Oh, Xiao Hua's tone was vague and non-committal. I can reveal a piece of information to Taoist Xiao. Ancestor has already escaped. Taoist Master Qing Su's face was full of mystery. Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and was very surprised. Actually, how would he know who Grand Mist Ancestor was? Where did he escape from? You didn't expect it, right? Taoist Master Qing Su's face was full of pride. Ancestor actually came out alive from the Buddhist, Confucian, and demon seals. In the future, we'll all have someone to rely on. Taoist Xiao, establishing the Taoist sect isn't something you can do alone. It's also not something a 4th grade Essence Chi disciple like you can do. As long as you rely on Ancestor, no, it can't be called relying on Ancestor. As long as you act according to Ancestor's arrangements, the entire hidden immortal continent of our Taoist sect is just a chessboard. With Ancestor's approval, Our Taoist sect will definitely regain its glory. Boom! Taoist Master Ching Su's words were like a thunderbolt that struck Xiao Hua. He instantly thought of the voice in the West Sea. Thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua probed, "Fellow Taoist, that is Mahavajrana's Buddhist edict? Also, with so many seals, how did the old ancestor get out? So what if there are more seals?" Taoist Master Ching Su said proudly, "Ancestor primordial miscultivation is profound. Even if he was imprisoned by a demon formation, protected by the yin-yang illustration mirror, and suppressed by the Mahavajrana Buddha's edict, he could still escape." Hiss! Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. He finally understood who was released from the eye of the West Sea when he had just arrived at the hidden immortal continent. Then again, thinking about the Grand Mist ancestor's ruthlessness when he had tried to escape, Xiao Hua's heart turned cold. Perhaps the Grand Mist ancestor was powerless to bring him out, or perhaps he had been suppressed for who knows how many years and longed for freedom. But he couldn't just leave him in the eye of the sea, right? What benefits would he get from following such a Taoist senior? Moreover, according to Taoist Master Ching Su, the Grand Mist ancestor still didn't know how to play up the story of his escape. Therefore, Huang Xiaolong was definitely not a character in the Grand Mist ancestor story. If Huang Xiaolong appeared in front of the Grand Mist ancestor, how would the Grand Mist ancestor deal with him? Forget it. Xiao Hua's mouth was bitter. He didn't dare to put his life in the hands of others. Since fellow Taoist knows about the Grand Mist ancestor, then the matter fellow Taoist asked just now, he must also know about it. Taoist Master Ching Su saw the change in Xiao Hua's expression and thought that Xiao Hua was pondering. He took the opportunity to say, "I will immediately tell fellow Taoist once I have the results. Of course, if the ancestor has these things, he will certainly bestow them to you. Don't worry, the ancestor is very fond of disciples like you and me who are at the upper 4th grade of Essence Force." Xiao Hua's eyes turned slightly, and he had a plan in his heart. After all, the Grand Mist ancestor had only seen his face and didn't know his name. It would be fine if he didn't meet with him in the future. Moreover, an acquaintance might not be able to see through a person's nature. Perhaps he should observe for a while longer. After all, this Grand Mist ancestor was a Taoist senior, and even if he was a heartless person, it would be a good thing if he could help Huang Xiaolong support the Taoist sect. Then I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist with this matter. Xiao Hua nodded. Taoist Master Ching Su was overjoyed and transmitted his voice. Obtaining fellow Taoist Zhao's favor is comparable to Taoist Huda and the other two. I's trip was not in vain. Haha, fellow Taoist Master Ching Su, there's no need for this. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Whether it's fellow Taoist, I, or even the Grand Mist ancestor, we are all Taoist cultivators. When facing Confucian cultivators, we should all stand together. Well said. Taoist Master Ching Su nodded. After the Jadestige meeting, I will immediately report to the ancestor and ask him to send someone to receive fellow Taoist. Receive. Xiao Hua frowned and shook his head slightly. Fellow Taoist Master Ching Su wants me to meet the ancestor and personally pledge my loyalty. Yes. Taoist Master Ching Su said with a smile. Our Taoist sect uses very few resources on the hidden immortal continent. If fellow Taoist doesn't pledge your loyalty to the ancestor, how can the ancestor be at ease? Then forget it. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. I don't intend to pledge my loyalty to anyone, no matter what their cultivation is. Shu. Taoist Master Ching Su hurriedly whispered. Taoist Master Xiao, it's better to speak less of such arrogant words. The ancestor doesn't like it. Fellow Taoist, please, just pretend you never saw me. Xiao Hua raised his hand and gestured. Taoist Master Ching Su hesitated for a moment and said with a bitter smile, with fellow Taoist temper, I really don't know how you managed to cultivate to the late stage of nascent soul. I have a Taoist heart, a Taoist foundation, and even more a lofty character. Xiao Hua said proudly, I also have a great ambition to establish my Taoist sect. Even a heavenly Tao will help me. All right. Taoist Master Ching Su thought for a moment and said, I will report this matter to the ancestor. However, I don't know how the ancestor will answer or how to deal with fellow Taoist matter. Of course, fellow Taoists can rest assured. No matter what, fellow Taoist Xiao is still a disciple of our Taoist sect. Even if fellow Taoist isn't used by the ancestor will only help him and definitely won't make things difficult for him. And I understand. Xiao Hua nodded. Also pass my greetings to the ancestor. I also hope that he can lead the Taoist sect cultivators to stand at the peak of the hidden immortal continent. All right, I will take my leave now. Taoist Master Ching Su flipped his hand and took out a small jade plate. He handed it over to Xiao Hua and said, This is Eyes Communication Jade Image. If fellow Taoist has any matters, feel free to look for me. Oh, Communication Jade Image? Xiao Hua received it very curiously. This was also refined by the ancestor. It's an ancient communication technique. Fellow Taoist only needs to activate your magic power, and you will know the secret inside. Taoist Master Ching Su smiled slightly. Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he said with a smile, Fellow Taoist seems to have promised to give me a magic treasure just now, right? Taoist Master Ching Su blinked his eyes and replied, Is that so? Did this old man promise? What do you want? Give me the jade slip to refine this item. Xiao Hua said with a smile. You know how to refine tools? Taoist Master Ching Su's eyes lit up. Xiao Hua said with a smile, I know a thing or two. Great. Taoist Master Ching Su clapped his hands and said, There are very few Taoist cultivators in my hidden immortal continent who can refine items. With Taoist Master Zhao's help, great things can be done. All right, I will make a deal with fellow Taoist. And you can also say that I am making a deal with the ancestor. Xiao Hua said with a smile, I can refine items for the ancestor, but all the materials will be provided by the ancestor. My reward is that the ancestor must protect my safety. Moreover, I want 20% of the materials used to refine the items. Haha, I don't dare to agree to this. Moreover, I don't have the jade slip to refine the communication jade image. Let me return and ask the ancestor first. However, fellow Taoist, don't worry, the ancestor should agree. Taoist Master Ching Su seemed to be very happy. Xiao Hua nodded and put away the communication jade image. He cupped his hands and said, I believe fellow Taoists can send messages to me through this communication jade image. Now, I won't delay fellow Taoists' great cause of revival. Farewell. Farewell. Taoist Master Ching Su smiled and cupped his hands. He watched as Xiao Hua walked toward another stall and haggled with an early Jindan cultivator. Then, with a smile on his face, he turned and blended into the crowd and disappeared. Looking at some materials in front of him, Xiao Hua didn't pay attention to what was behind him. Currently, he was somewhat uncertain in his heart. The cooperation with this so-called Grand Mist ancestor was also an impromptu idea. After all, Taoist Master Ching Su was right. Even if he had a whole body of iron, how many nails could he forge? When he could borrow strength, he still needed to borrow strength. Anyway, he was refining items and exchanging with this Grand Mist ancestor. It didn't involve any karma. Fellow Taoist, just as Xiao Hua was pondering, a slightly hoarse voice sounded in his ear. Have you taken a fancy to this spirit fruit? Oh, Xiao Hua came back to his senses. He was fiddling with a few materials that weren't considered rare, but his hand unconsciously picked up a dark fruit the size of a thumb. Xiao Hua simply picked it up and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist. Seeing this cultivator in front of him, Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. This cultivator wasn't tall and wore a dark blue armor. His face was covered by a helmet and couldn't be seen clearly. However, Xiao Hua had a very familiar feeling from the bottom of his heart. This cultivator wasn't a human. Perhaps I should call you fellow Taoist, Xiao Hua said with a smile. What's this called? What's its use? The cultivator's voice was slightly surprised, as if he didn't expect Xiao Hua to see through his true appearance. However, seeing that Xiao Hua didn't intend to expose him, he calmed down and explained, This is a snake-eye fruit. It's a commonly used healing item by snake demons in the Thousand Demons sacred territory. It has a miraculous effect on cultivators' injuries. If fellow Taoist wants to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering, it's best to buy a few. In my opinion, it's more useful than your Tao Sec spirit pills. Fellow Taoist, is a demon of the Thousand Demons sacred territory? Xiaohua looked around and lowered his voice. Since this demon covered his appearance, he obviously had some misgivings. Xiaohua didn't speak loudly. I am indeed a demon of the Thousand Demons sacred territory. The demon nodded and calmly admitted. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.